101 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, February 18th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 17, and Smiths Falls, minus 19 degrees. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. It's been approved in more than 50 countries, including Britain, both the EU and the World Health Organization authorizing it as well. But in our country, where's a vaccination rollout? It's getting failing grades here. We have yet to see the green light on the AstraZeneca vaccine.
The global curve is trending down. New daily cases are the lowest they've been since October.
So far this year, the number of weekly reported cases has fallen by almost half. This shows that simple public health measures work, even in the presence of variants.
The Director General of the World Health Organization with the big picture situation. Many countries full steam ahead now when it comes to vaccinations. Canada still lagging behind on that rollout, but daily case rates are down more than 60% in this country compared to a peak just over a month ago. There are concerns this could lead to a false sense of security or complacency as more pandemic restrictions are lifted. I'm Jamie Pulfer.
City News Time 9:01. An update on Ontario's labour market amid COVID-19 will be released very shortly. Financial Accountability Office will be reporting on the impact of the pandemic on employment across various demographic groups, industries, as well as major cities in our province. That report expected to be posted on the FAO website coming up very shortly. Fire crews are calling for caution in the West End this morning as Ottawa Fire responded to multiple collisions due to poor visibility. They say most of the collisions are minor, although there was a 3-vehicle collision, and that involved a school bus. Police say road closures are in place around Moody. City News Time 9:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
The clouds will increase as we work through the day. The high -4. Some flurries tonight, -10. Will feel like -15 overnight. And then for tomorrow, periods of snow, about 3 centimeters at this point. The high -4. That's our high for today, -4.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's -17 degrees. Hundreds of thousands of people in Texas waking up to a 4th day without power. Winter storms wreaked havoc on the state's power grid and utilities. Extreme weather is blamed for the deaths of more than 30 people in that state. Houston area resident Yvonne Woolard works in the energy industry and says the state facilities were simply not prepared for the cold.
They decided not to winterize our plants, so everything is failing. And something has to be done. Somebody has to be held accountable for it.
Now, the snowy weather has also jeopardized drinking water systems, leading officials to order 7 million people to boil their tap water before they drink it. City News Time 9:03. No injuries when a school bus slid off the road. This happened yesterday afternoon in Petawawa. OPP say there were 30 kids on board the bus when the driver tried to stop but slid off the shoulder on Petawawa Boulevard. That was around 3:30 in the afternoon. Everyone got off the bus safely and were taken to a nearby parking lot. A second bus took the kids home. The first bus had to be towed from the shoulder. Police say it was not damaged, though, and police say no charges have been laid. You may not be driving as much these days as before the pandemic, so it may come as a bit of a shock the next time you fill up. Gas prices have been steadily rising. City News reporter Carl Hansky says there's a couple of reasons why.
That Texas winter storm you've been hearing about, that's getting part of the blame. It's estimated a third of oil production in the U.S. is offline right now due to that power outage in the Lone Star State.
And that is affecting the price of oil, so boosting the price at the pumps. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Separating headlines
from hearsay.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
I think we're almost to the end of this, and things are starting to look up. I'm talking about the weather. Above zero next week in the forecast. Good morning. This is the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Every day I thank you for spending part of your day with us. We have a great show lined up for you. Local issues very much in focus for us today. It seems to be that way lately on on a Thursday. In a few minutes from now, Randall Denley will join us, author and columnist with Post Media. He writes about local issues for the Ottawa Citizen, has for many years. He writes about the Ford government for the National Post. Randall's column this week in the Citizen is about intensification, infill development. And this is an issue that I hear about more and more often, all the time. It's not just an inside the greenbelt kind of thing anymore. It's happening all over the city. In the core, but also in suburbia. You have an older single-family home, and it comes on the market, and somebody scoops up, buys it, treats it as a tear down, and before you know it, the neighbors are upset because they're living next door to 4 units or 6 units, and it doesn't fit into the neighborhood. It used to be a big thing in the downtown core, and now it's kind of spreading out. And not many of those projects ever get vetoed by anyone at City Hall, even though Randall Denley calls it in the paper this week, quote, a radical alteration of our city that is sailing through City Council. So it's an important issue we're going to discuss with him. And I'll ask him what he's working on for the National Post and his latest column on the Ford government. Doug Ford, oh boy, he's in some hot water. He is, not only is he getting slammed by health experts and his political opponents for his reopening plan, but also a remark, we actually carried this live yesterday here on the Rob Snow Show. He was taking heat from Andrea Horwath yesterday, the leader of the opposition, leader of the Ontario Democrats. Yeah, that Andrea Horwath, and he fired back with this yesterday during the question period.
Why don't you come and join us to support the people of Ontario for once, rather than just sit there and criticize. Why
are you criticizing?
It's like listening to nails on a chalkboard, listening to you.
Nails on a chalkboard.
Remind all members to make their comments.
Okay, that's good, David. A lot of people think that was offside. The Premier should apologize, not just to Andrea Horwath. Andrea Horwath says Doug Ford should apologize to every woman in Ontario. He's being accused of sexism, misogyny. So we will listen in to some of the Queen's Park question period this morning. We'll be listening for, and I'm sorry, from Premier Ford. Also on the local front, the Kanata area councillor, the chair of Ottawa's Transit Commission, Allan Hubley, is going to be on our program this morning. Get into the operational plan for OC Transpo. What a mess. What a mess this thing is. Topic of much debate yesterday at the latest meeting of the Transit Commission. It's a weird place. OC Transpo. It seems that in City Council's view, OC Transpo is untouchable, sacred. It is something that I know many of you have brought up on this show since the pandemic was first declared, since the first lockdown went into effect. Because you were seeing it with your own two eyes. Everyone in town has seen this. The empty buses driving all over town, empty LRT trains, chewing between Blair and Tunney's pasture. And no, that is not an illusion. That is actually happening. We learned yesterday ridership at OC Transpo has not recovered. It's nowhere near pre-COVID levels. It's down still between 80% and 90%. 90% drop in ridership on the O train. And yet, for the City Council, they're supposed to be the stewards of the public purse. When it comes to running the city's public transit system, which I would like to remind you is a better than $640 million endeavor these days in this city, to run OC Transpo, $640 million a year. It is as though the pandemic never happened. And everyone is still cramming onto articulated buses like the good old days. It's nothing like the good old days, or what do some people call it? The before times. The before times. And look, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? When are people at City Hall, the ones we elect, when are they going to clue in that the world has changed when it comes to public transit? I see they're going to take one train out of service. One train. Oh, that'll make all the difference in the world, I guess. One train to find some token savings. And even that is being met with howls of outrage, right? From someone, oh, how dare you remove one train? Don't touch even one train. Is it really prudent? Is this city council even doing its job? If it runs a public service at 100% when use by clients is down 90%. For almost a year, I've been saying, no, that is irresponsible by the people in charge of running this city to do that to the taxpayers. And I put that to you again today during our talk back hour. We do that every morning between 10 and 11. Phone calls, hottest talk radio in town, 750-1310. Be part of it today. Who is paying for OC Transpo? OC Transpo is operating like it is some kind of magical fantasy land. It must be the only business on earth where sales can drop by 90% and everyone just keeps on working like nothing ever happened. That is a heck of a way to take care of the taxpayers' best interests. Ridiculous. Councillor Fleury on our show this morning as well. Community and Protective Services Committee's meeting this morning. It's about a long-standing issue that I have been following with great interest on this program from time to time. It's this idea that the city spends $3,000 a month. Can you even imagine it? $3,000 a month to house families in motel rooms in Vanier, in places like the Ottawa Inn, for example, which sounds quaint, is not quaint. Okay, not at all. $3,000 a month. Can you even imagine? $3,000 a month. David, I've never ever, I rented a lot of places in Ottawa. In the 30 years that I've lived here, a lot of places. I could add up 5 or 6 of them and not come to $3,000.
Not even close.
Like $3,000 a month? Have you ever rented anything for $3,000 a month? $3,000 a month?
I saw a place once, top floor.
You saw a place, yeah.
Indoor pool, heated floors.
You just went to look.
I just went to look.
Yeah, let's see how the other half lives.
Must be nice.
No, let's see how the 1% lives.
Oh, yeah.
It had heated floors.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Heated floors, eh? Conrad Black once had a place with heated towel racks. That's my goal in life. I just want one heated towel rack.
That's the dream.
That's the dream.
That's the dream.
But even now with this crazy housing market in Ottawa, I bet you could still get a really nice place for $3,000 a month. And I'll tell you what, it wouldn't be the Ottawa Inn on Montreal Road. No, it would not. And yet this city government, in its infinite wisdom, that's what it's been willing to pay, with using your money, of course, for years and years and years on end to house homeless families. And shall we say, what are very, very, very modest accommodations on Montreal Road. Families deserve better. Taxpayers certainly deserve better. And Councillor Fleury, Councillor McKenney, they're going to have a motion at this committee to finally try and end this. Well, I say crazy. No, it's not crazy. It's stupid. It's dumb. This arrangement during this committee meeting today. I spoke with Councillor Fleury. I'll play that for you a little later. Busy show. Michelle Rempel-Garner is back on the show this morning. Calgary area Conservative Member of Parliament, health critic. Commons Health Committee meeting again this week. They're trying to lift the veil of secrecy that Trudeau has about the government's vaccine contracts. Filibuster. You show us the contracts. Filibuster. They keep filibustering. Imagine the committee wants to get a look at the contracts. Some countries have made their contracts with the vaccine makers public. Not the Trudeau Liberals, though. It's all top secret stuff. Not even your member of parliament is allowed to see the details. And some members of parliament have top secret security clearance. So we're going to get into that. Trudeau told a Toronto radio station this morning, we will all be vaccinated by September. You want to be vaccinated by September? Don't worry. That's the timeline. That's the timeline. He's sticking to it. I want to talk about another timeline this morning, and that's the timing of the next federal election. A lot of election speculation. Are we going to the polls? Just given where we are right now. With the virus, with the pandemic and variants and vaccines, is it really prudent to hold a federal election? Do you think we should even have a federal election, since a lot of people think there's going to be one and that it's going to be soon? May, June at the latest, but what do you think? Is it safe to have an election? We keep being told, don't go anywhere, stay inside, don't go see your grandmother. We have governments imposing curfews, but let's drag people to the polls in an election? What kind of crazy stuff is this? Or you could say, look at the Americans. They had an election. They had record voter turnout. If they can do it, so can we. All of that and more this morning on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
I always knew I was going to own my own business, and I've always wanted to have a store. And I sort of figured when the right concept came together at the right time, I would move forward with that plan. And so through doing some environmental initiatives in the restaurant group that I was with prior to opening this store, it just triggered my path towards being more environmentally conscientious and wanting to make more of a difference, and hopefully encouraging, inspiring other people to want to do the same, at which point the idea for All Eco was born. I have some really fun products. I have a really wide spectrum of products. So the things we look for in terms of qualifying products are sustainably made, upcycled, recycled, zero waste, all natural, no harmful chemicals to like the environment or to our bodies. We have like fun stuff, so like really clean burning candles, lots of really natural body care and skin care. I put a real emphasis on Canadian products. I really try to support up and comers, and I always source Canada first. The refill bar is really important to me. It's really huge. I think that's been exciting as well, because I thought it was going to be a real process in convincing people that this is a better way to go. And actually it was just like right away there was a built-in affinity towards doing refill, which has been great. We closed, I think, probably we were closed down by before the second week of March. Just didn't feel we could comfortably or confidently stay open, even though I do sell essential products, like in terms of the cleaning. But we just didn't feel we could make a safe space for ourselves or our customers at that time, and especially with the information we had at the time. So we did close our doors, at which point I did not have a website, because that was I hadn't even scheduled myself to have a website at that point. So that was sort of like full speed moving towards that and trying to drive the business, at the same time still get myself on the map because I was so new. So during that time, as we were building the website, we were still doing a lot of video shopping and private shopping, online shopping, like online phone, text. Any way I could do business, I was doing it. And there was really a nice show of support for my business during that time, which was really, really encouraging. And now, we are fully set up online too.
Opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Randall Denley is back. Author and post-media columnist. We'll talk about intensification right now, the topic of his A very enlightening column in the Ottawa Citizen this week. Good morning, Randall Denley.
Good morning, Rob.
What is the vision from City Hall about what intensification will look like, according to the official plan?
Well, it will look like 4-story apartment buildings with unlimited units on any street that they decide is major. Under this scenario, Byron would be a major street, although you mightn't have thought it to drive on the street or walk down it. Corner lots, that's a good spot for, 6 units, bigger buildings. Anywhere, really, is a good spot for 3 stories. The thing they don't want is single-family houses to replace single-family houses. Even, duplexes don't really cut it. And, Rob, I think what this is driven by is sort of a backwards calculation where they say, well, if we wanted 60% intensification, that's their goal over time, how many units would we have to get in the existing area? Ooh, that's a lot. How do we get them? It isn't going to be from what people think of intensification now, mostly is, one little house was torn down and look, 2 other houses were put up. Okay, it's a doubling. That's not going to do it. No, we need to create this new thing, really, which is these apartment buildings seated all over single-family home streets, because that's the only way you get the volume. If you don't imagine that this will happen, then you have to, as a planner, go back to councillors and say, well, look, I'm sorry, we have no rational scenario where we can get that much growth inside the Greenbelt. So I'm sorry, guys, despite everything we like and believe, we're going to have to approve more suburban development. But as long as you pretend that you can get those units, then at least for now, you can say, no, look, intensification, that'll do the job. Look, we've got a plan.
Right. Yeah. But really, given the recent developments, when it comes to the planning file at Ottawa City Hall, how would you characterize the consistency of the decision-making?
I say they're consistent in their inconsistency.
Okay.
Because when people might ask, well, why do you have to put a 4-story apartment building beside my house? There's been 2 answers. Well, one is, we need to protect agricultural land, food insecurity. And the other is, suburban sprawl, we don't want that.
Sprawl, traffic, environment, roads, all bad. Yeah.
Right. So now, having decided that, no, we won't build agricultural land unless, as it turns out, we put a transit station in the middle of the agricultural land. So we'll build on that piece. It's different. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what about sprawl? Well, you and I have talked about these, the Taywin Algonquin lands that are out of Carlsbad Springs.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of calling suburban development sprawl, but this is an area disconnected from all existing development. If you were going to call anything sprawl, that's sprawl. So having said yes to those 2 things, then what do you say to people? They say, well, okay, if intensification is so important, why are you guys approving that stuff? Rather than put all these buildings on my street or my neighborhood, why don't you just approve more of the stuff you just approved? They're really in a position where there's no intellectual consistency to what they're doing, but of course they're just doing it anyway. As long as you ignore that, I guess you can live with it if you're a councillor.
Yeah, but I think the last few weeks have made a mockery out of what is supposed to be official planning.
They have.
And the hard work by the staff, by the way, and the hard work that's been put in on the file.
Yeah, I'm sure they're very frustrated, partly because council went and tied their hands. They said, come back and tell us how much land we need for expansion. But, we don't want any sprawl, and we don't want to use up any good farmland, and should be close to LRT. And when they came back, they couldn't actually find enough land that they were recommending that would fit into that, so they wanted to go and look at other land down the line. Maybe we can get the number up. But they did what councillors asked them to do. And councillors turned around and said, well, what's this silliness? Okay, well, let's just throw out what we've told you to do, and we'll just do other stuff. And the stuff that hasn't been evaluated, if they just said to staff, look, we have a preference for not, going too far in the suburbs or not building ag land, but come back and tell us what you think would be best. They didn't do that. They gave them very specific guidance. And then they didn't stick to it. So if I were a planner at the city, I'd say, well, what are we doing here, folks? You know, we've spent the last year and a half talking to people about all this. And now the bosses just said, yeah, no, we won't do it always, just when we feel like it.
Yep.
I'm getting a lot of reaction on this intensification, though, Rob. I think people are getting lit up on this one because it's a rare city issue that affects every built-up part in the city. And even if there's nothing specific in your neighborhood right now.
Well, your warning, I think, in your columns, you've written a few columns now along this theme here lately, is if you haven't been impacted by it yet, it's only a matter of time before you are, or your neighborhood is, right?
Yeah, it's likely a matter of time, and it creates a level of anxiety for people because the way they're changing zoning to marry up with the official plan, it just means that if somebody says, yeah, I just bought the house next door and putting up a 4-story apartment building, there's no grounds to appeal that. You know, it's full accordance with the official plan. You can't go to any external appeal body. It's going to go through. We can talk about the roof line, something like that, the placement of a tree. But there's just no way to say no to it for people in neighborhoods. But here's the weird twist on this one, though, Rob, is I spoke to a number of people in the development industry. Well, what do you guys think of this? Including a person who does this sort of small infill niche work. And the feeling is the city's plan just doesn't work. I mean, some people think, look, you can't make any money doing this because it's an expensive, one-off, unique deal, all the same, you know, planning run around as you were building a subdivision, little thing here, little thing there. Like, the big companies are not going to get into that. No money to be made, not interested. But even for the small ones, when the city says, yeah, you can put up 12 units here, but no parking would be required. If you're the builder, you say, well, no, but wait, people want parking. Where am I going to put it? As the city has placed trees and landscaping as a top priority, you've got to meet all their standards there. Hey, if there's some parking spot left over, then, you know, that could be okay as long as it's a porous surface. But when you turn around to sell these units,
right?
Like somebody said, you know, if you're going to build a unit in Westboro, it's going to be expensive, and people who can afford that have a car.
Yeah, probably a nice car, probably more than one car, actually. So
yeah, so it's just, and even when you go to a lender to finance your project, they're going to say, so what's the parking? Oh, there isn't any. Well, why do you think you can sell this? Like, we're not putting money into this. It's just totally divorced from reality, and the industry's told them this, but they just don't care because they have a plan.
No. Until they don't. Okay, right.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
Yeah,
really.
It is. Okay, Randall, look, you have a column coming out today for the Post? Or
Yeah, I do. I'm looking at the bite back on the reopening, you know, Toronto saying essentially at the last minute, oh, keep it closed for a few more weeks.
Yeah.
Well, until what? Like, what do we think is going to be happening then that's different?
Okay. Look forward to that. Look forward to that, Randall. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Yeah, look for that on the website of the National Post this afternoon, Ford and lockdowns. We'll be right back after the 9:30 news on City News.
The Rob...
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, February 18th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's minus 15 degrees, and here's what's making news this hour. Ontario Financial Accountability Office says 2020 saw the biggest job loss on record. The FAO says Ontario's employment dropped by some 355,300 jobs in 2020. That represents an almost 5% drop in the employment rate. The FAO says the job loss affected more women than men. Today's COVID-19 numbers are coming out in the next hour, and rates continue to fall, but the top doctors in a couple of provincial hot zones are calling for the lockdown to continue, saying it's too early to reopen businesses. Federal Justice Minister David Lametti is set to introduce legislation to reform or scrap mandatory minimum sentences and also divert people charged with minor drug offenses out of the criminal justice system. The reforms are aimed at reducing the overrepresentation of Black, racialized, and Indigenous people in the system. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So again, still ahead on the program, city issues a major focus for us on this Thursday morning. Still ahead, we have Councillor Hubley coming on, the chair of the Transit Commission. He chaired that meeting yesterday and talking about potential savings, cost savings, i.e. cuts at OC Transpo. So we'll ask him about that. As well, Councillor Mathieu Fleury, and remember, Councillor Fleury chairs community housing, Ottawa public housing in the city of Ottawa. So that's still ahead. Right now, we have Christine Leadman is on the line, Executive Director of the Bank Street BIA and a former City Councillor for Kitchissippi Ward. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
And Walter Robinson, old pal of mine, who has had too many jobs to list. His old line is, "Do you know who I used to be?" Good morning, Walter.
Good morning to you, Rob. Old jobs, but not that old. And good morning to Christine.
Yes,
Yep.
Good morning, Walter.
Former Chief of Staff to Mayor Larry O'Brien, of course. Part of his City Hall resume. But Christine, maybe Walter and I will just pepper you with questions here this morning. We'll like tag team you. How would you describe the current business conditions for merchants in the core for your members of the BIA there?
Well, pretty dire for sure. It certainly has been a challenge, for members to, maintain their businesses if they're even able to do that. High-end restaurants, are not equipped necessarily to just, switch over to takeout and delivery service. So, and it's interesting because a lot of people say, "Well, have you lost any businesses?" And I said, "Or what businesses have closed?" And I said, "Well, they're all closed." Most of them during the lockdown. And I said, so it's not a matter of, who's closed. It's a matter of who's going to open at this point.
Right. And it's not just restaurants. I mean, restaurants get a lot of media. And but my gosh, it's every manner of merchant along Bank Street, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, that holds true for any area.
Sure.
And strip mall and shopping centers, these are all greatly impacted.
Yeah. So what can be done at this point, Christine, say by the city, for example, focusing locally here to further support these businesses right now?
Well, I think that being a little more nimble and more flexible, more open to new and innovative ideas. When you have just recently a restaurant in one of the suburban areas had a tent up, and an inspector went in out of nowhere and issued a fine saying that, well, you're not 3 meters from your building, you have to apply for a building permit for the tent. So, with
building permit for the tent.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. So it's those challenges that whatever turn a business will take, there's always some kind of regulation that has to be, managed or followed. And, I know it's difficult for staff because they have to work within a parameter that, that are set by council and bylaws, et cetera. But in these times, those things have to be looked at through a different lens. Yep. And that's starting to happen, so that's a good thing. But when you look at the regulations that the restaurants have to meet, they're extraordinary.
So, Walter, I'd love to hear you comment on this, the ability of any level of government to be nimble and flexible. Is historically, I'm sure your experience would say, probably not a strength of government, any government.
Not a strength of government for sure, but to give credit where credit is due, what the pandemic has done is shown us where you can streamline regulations or ask, does this really need to be applied? The city did this in terms of deferring tax collections, not making them go away, but deferring tax collections, extending patio season to the restaurant sector and the hospitality sector. And we've seen it at the federal and provincial levels too, in terms of pharmacy regulations, liquor delivery regulations, those sorts of things. So the challenge is to make some of those things permanent to help business. We need regulation, but we need smart regulation, not burdensome regulation for justifying people's existence in positions. I would say the other thing to come back, and I have nothing to add to Christine, because she's speaking with merchants across a whole things, restaurants, bookstores, repair stores, clothing, all these kind of local businesses that we want to support. But I would say that the key thing that the city can do, and they should be communicating this as the province is starting to do it, as these vaccine supplies are now rolling in, is to literally be maximizing and on Monday running out and making sure we have enough for Tuesday and running out and making sure we have enough for Wednesday as mass vaccination distributed across the community is the place where we can continue to also build herd immunity and give people confidence, even as they're masking up and still going out, as our seniors, and my mom gets her shot hopefully on Friday. She's going to be 88 soon. I'm so happy about that.
Yeah.
That's what we need to do. That's where you can help these businesses, because wage deferrals and wage subsidies and all these other things from other levels of government, it only goes so far. As they say in business, nothing happens until somebody sells something. And if you can't have that exchange online or face-to-face, you're not creating and sustaining an economy.
Yeah. Do you agree there, Christine? Yeah.
Absolutely. And everything has to go in tandem. And the thing is that businesses look at it from their own perspective, of course. When you have to look at the broader picture, like what Walter is suggesting here. And that's still tough, because when it hits that close to home and it's whether you can get food on the table for your family, it's hard for people to look beyond that.
When you're looking at, you and I have talked about this in the past, Christine Leadman, when you're looking for, say, nimbleness and flexibility from the city, give us a sense of some kinds of things that maybe people wouldn't normally think of. I think to the last conversation that we had, when you're, for example, you want to close businesses and you want to have people dine in the middle of Bank Street, for example, on a nice summer night, for example. The kind of discussions that you have to have. You have to talk to the police. You have to talk to the fire department. You have to talk to bylaw people. You have to come up with emergency routes. What if there's a fire? What if there's a medical emergency? All of these things need to happen, right? And people might think, oh, it sounds so easy. Just put a couple of barricades and some police cars, and let's have the table d'hôte and we're on our way, right? It doesn't work that way, right?
It doesn't work that way,
no.
And it's interesting because I had just sent a request, to the city, because getting ahead of the game here is what's our plan for the summer. Will we look at closing Bank Street again as we did last year? And been advised that, there's going to be an integrated team that's going to work, with businesses so that when they have these requests coming in, that there's something there. And I said, well, it'd be nice to have a timeline for that, because businesses have to order products. They have to order inventory. If they need tables and chairs, if they're going to have tents, they need to have that well in advance of how they're going to move forward during these times. And sometimes the city is not that quick. Now, last year, we closed Bank Street on Saturdays. Nothing. We were not allowed to put anything on the street. Ourselves. The restaurants could put out patios, furniture, etc.
Right.
We had nothing, no programming, and we're still required to have security. We were still required to have medical teams on board. There was signage changing, which was costing me from the city $3,000 a weekend.
Wow.
A day, just for the city to change the street signs. So, it's a burden. It's expensive. It was at least $15,000 every weekend to close on a Saturday. So, and that's just the.
And how are those expenses covered?
Through the BIA.
Through the BIA.
Yeah.
Through the BIA. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So, the members can't afford to do that. That's not within their realm. Their focus is on their own specific business. It's our role to provide an environment where it's comfortable for people to come. It's a destination that people will want to walk through, stop and have something to drink or eat. That was the purpose of doing the street closure.
So, Walter, how do you? It sounds like a bureaucratic nightmare. How do you cope with something like that? How could you alleviate a situation like that, do you think, Walter?
Well, one thing, if I could be flippant but half serious and half joking, we could ask city councillors for the next month to live on the salaries and some of that these business owners are not taking any money, trying to keep their people employed using various subsidy programs to really understand the reality of what they're facing. But that's more symbolic than anything else. What I think the situation is, and I'm of the mixed mind of whether we should have been reopening again, because I believe we're going to be shut down in another 3 or 4 weeks. Some people are calling what March and April could be a bloodbath with these variants, because we're just not going to have enough people vaccinated. And then, as Christine says, you ramp up, you ramp down. There are just carrying costs for that, the minimum order quantities, minimum order. And some businesses, as I'm sure Christine's members and others around the city are saying, it's not even worth it for me right now in terms of the carrying cost to open up. And I weigh that off against what minimal revenue I may have. And it doesn't work. The numbers don't work. So again, we're at the mercy of getting things under control. But I do believe that as we get to March and April and we have fresh air, we really need flexibility on outdoor shopping. Perhaps Bank Street becomes a sidewalk, the old school sidewalk sale almost every day if you can, in terms of people being more comfortable.
Not a bad idea.
You can use your Square app. You can use a whole bunch of other apps running off your iPad. Now, 80 to 90% of the people are just tapping right now anyways. It's secure, contactless transaction. And the other point, the sense of community, you don't, and I keep bringing this back to, I spent last about a year and a half ago in Windsor, and the Caesars Casino, fabulous convention facility and gambling place, but they moved the arena, they put the casino there, and the rest of the downtown, every second store is boarded up. It is not pleasant. It is a vector for crime. It is places where people don't want to live. And when you want to build community, and the stuff you were chatting about with Randall before the break, before we came on about intensification, there's a smart way to do it. You want to have not an 8-hour day like the government buildings. I hope we'll chat about that. You want a 15, 16, 18, 20-hour day. Well, maybe not 20 for people who live there, but you want a double-digit day of commerce and activity, people on the street.
Bank in Somerset, the next Times Square.
Absolutely. You want to be in the village. You want to get right down to the parliamentary precinct, right up to Gladstone, right up to the highway. You want that to be a spine of commerce and community development.
Okay. Are you optimistic at all about this reopening, Christine?
Historically, if we just look back over the past year, I probably not as enthusiastic because for me, I find it's very it's depressing. I think for members, when they open up, they go through all the effort trying to find staff again to bring back because not full staff are available anymore. They could have found other jobs, moved out of the city, whatever, and then have to shut it all down again. It's like reopening your business, and it's traumatic. And I think it's very. Some of them might just say, "Well, I'm going to wait." but the likelihood is that it most likely will be shut down again if people do not take the proper precautions that they need to take. And with, as Walter has indicated, the new variants that are coming out and the combinations that are now happening as a result of variants, we have to be careful. And let's just say we're all, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. How's that? That's the best I can do at this point.
Okay. All right, we'll be right back with Walter Robinson and Christine Leadman talking some more city issues, like the future of downtown Ottawa without civil servants working in those office towers. This is the Rob Snow Show, City News.
Well, we're celebrating our 43rd year. It's still family operated. We're in our second generation. We, pre-COVID, we're at about 1,000 employees. We have 20 stores from coast to coast in Canada. We do our own manufacturing. Right here in Ottawa, we have about 160 people that support Canadian-made manufacturing in addition to our retail stores. Taking you back to mid-March and the impact of the pandemic on Lee Valley. Lee Valley was actually in a tough spot. We had just launched our website a few months prior to that, and we were going through, a fairly typical deployment dive where your customers retract as they adjust to the website. And then under stress already, this pandemic hit. And in the early days, it was pretty critical. It hit us really hard. Stores were closed. We weren't sure what to do, so we had to go right into survival mode. As a result, we had to take our workforce almost back to half of where we were at because the stores were closed, and with 20 stores, that's a big retail workforce. But what we were able to do pretty quickly, with a little luck, being essential, selling tools and hardware, we were able to adjust our business model, with respect to the stores and our fulfillment operation. That new website that we were under stress worked out well for us because as the world was under house arrest, people were looking to online. And the conversion to our online sales in some cases almost doubled. And we saw tremendous interest in things to do at home. Where we were lucky once again and fortunate is that our product offering. Work at home tools, craft, hobbies, backyard, container gardening, you name it. What we sold was really appealing to people. With respect to our stores, Lee Valley, a rare unknown fact was that we were one of the pioneers of curbside pickup. We've been doing it for 25 years. Pretty much dove right into the application to help with the contactless shopping right away. We took the application, and it's not like a Apple application where you have to download it to your phone and clutter up your phone. This is literally resides right on our website. So you walk into our store with your phone, you pull up our website, and there's a little scan icon. You just tap that, select your store, off you go. You go through the showroom, you scan product, you can read more about it, you can check the on hand, you can add it to your cart, continue to shop, and when you're ready, you just submit it to the counter. We'll go pick it for you. We'll call out your name, we'll check you out, send you on your way. You haven't touched anything. It's completely safe, and it's using a device you're comfortable with and a website that you're familiar with. Amazingly, 9 out of 10 people that used it loved it and want to use it again.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Back talking city issues, we have Christine Leadman. Christine Leadman used to be a city councillor for Kitchissippi Ward and is now the executive director of the Bank Street BIA, and Walter Robinson, a longtime commentator on local affairs. He's been a senior executive. He's been in public affairs and government relations and life sciences. And it's great to have both of them on the program today. So, Christine, what do you know? What are you hearing about a return to work for civil servants downtown?
I'm not hearing much.
Not hearing much, right? It's all like a great mystery about what is actually going to happen, and just how frustrating is that for you right now, and the merchants you represent?
Well, it's certainly a challenge. Some businesses, really survive on the 9-to-5 business that we have downtown Bank Street. And, it's not just the government as well. There's a lot of people that supported other businesses, whether it was a dry cleaner or whatever. There's no employees in the area, working, so those are missing. Even our own office, because we're working remotely, but we're not in the core as much. Yeah. So, there are those challenges. When Winterloo just went by, and it was all virtual. We could do nothing on the street, not even put up signage.
Yeah. When I think about Centertown, for example, gosh, you have you have your own microeconomy there. And so much of it is dependent on those tens of thousands of civil servants who would come down to work every morning and leave in the afternoon, right?
Private sector, civil servants, contractors or consultants.
Sure. Yeah,
to the
law
government.
Firms, Shopify, everything. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. In tourism, because when
tourism,
that's gone as well. So it's basically looking within your own community to be supportive and to be as much as they can be, because who knows if they're employees anymore. I know a lot of people have been laid off. So it's a real challenge all around.
Yeah, but if there's an anchor tenant, Walter, it would be the public service, right?
Absolutely.
And what do you think the buzz is there? What do you think is going on behind the scenes there?
The federal government and the old Public Works or Public Services and Procurement Canada now is fundamentally rethinking its employment strategy and its deployment of people over the next decade to 20 years. Across the city. My wife is a federal public servant. Many of our friends on our street here are. Lots of kind of private sector, public sector marriages and homes. And they're not going back to work anytime soon. And even when they do, we get back to this concept I mentioned a few weeks ago, the 3-2-2. 3 days at home, 2 in the office, or 2 days at home, 3 in the office, and then your weekend. And that may be stretched over 7 days in terms of sanitizing, spacing. There are many people who love not spending 2 hours on the road each day.
Sure.
And if you're fortunate, we're empty nesters, so we're not homeschooling kids. We don't have those challenges. So this is the real issue, and this is the opportunity now in terms of these intensification debates, the official plan to build those communities and that sustained activity, community, and customer base to look at some of those buildings and figure out, can they be sold? Can they be retrofitted? Can you tear some of them down and build something new on existing footprint, service lands, service facilities? You're not putting a 10 or 15-story or 20-story mixed-use development in somebody's backyard in Westboro or Alta Vista or Old Gloucester and Blackburn Hamlet. You have that space. We can use it more effectively and more properly. This is where we need the innovation. This is where we need the creative thinking. This is where the city and the development community must truly collaborate and work together to build those condos for people who are selling their houses, and also the various levels of housing that we need for people at various incomes. It can be done. It just takes leadership and creativity, and I'm not seeing it from City Hall.
Okay. Okay. Are you running for something, Walter? You're not running for anything.
No, the voters released me to succeed elsewhere in 2004 federally, and I truly thank them for that, because I've been able to travel the world and make
the worst decision they ever made.
The glass is always half full, Rob.
Right. Oh, by the way, I should say, how is your fundraiser going, Walter? I meant to ask you about that. You're doing a fundraiser for brain tumor research, right?
For the Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada, thank you for asking. The goal is $100,000. They're trying to raise about 1.5 million nationally. And in about 22 days, I've raised just under $24,000. So we're going to meet the 100K and go further. And you and Christine will be receiving your fundraising email shortly.
Okay. Okay, I'll do what I can. So to segue out of, a large employer in the city, the largest employer in the city, and its transition plans. What about some kind of transition plan for the operation of OC Transpo? Does it really make sense to continue operating OC Transpo 100% when ridership is down 80 to 90%? Christine Leadman, what do you think about that?
Well, of course not.
Put your old city councillor hat on there. Councillor Leadman. What would you do there?
Well, I mean, you certainly have to reduce. I mean, it just makes sense. I mean, how can you run at 100% when 80 to 90% of people are not downtown, or they're not going.
They're not riding it. They're not using it, right?
And then there's also, again, what Walter spoke to was consumer confidence. How confident are people going to feel safe being on public transit? How much are they sanitizing? Are they following the protocols that they require everyone else to follow? In terms of, like if you ask a restaurant how much they have to clean, how much they have to disinfect, contact tracing, all of this stuff, that doesn't happen on transit. And so the thing is that I don't think people feel comfortable even getting on transit as a result. So I think you combine that with no one working downtown, or even at Tunney's Pasture. I live by Tunney's Pasture. The parking lot is empty.
Okay. Rob, the other issue here, though, with transit systems, I've been doing a lot of reading about this since I have time, because I'm a former everything. The other issue here, though, is ridership is down 80 to 90%, but there are still 10 or 20% of the people that use OC Transpo, so you can only cut service to a certain level, because those people many people have been impacted by the she session, the racialized communities, and the people who are literally do not have the privilege that I have of working from home. They have to go somewhere to a business that is still open. Yeah. They're the people who are working in some of our distribution centers in the region and frontline services. So you're going to have to only cut. But I guess
for that person, does that bus have to come every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes? Can it come every 20 minutes? Can it come every half hour? These are the things that I would like to look at.
But this is, again, where creativity. Let me go back to something, and people criticize this, I'll be quick. When Mayor O'Brien had his transportation task force, we put Hanif Patney, who was at Blue Line in Coventry at the time, and people screamed, this is wrong, this is wrong. Well, you're looking at transit services around the planet now that are saying, maybe in our nighttime routes and our smaller suburban routes, we need to think about contracting with safely and properly with ride-sharing services, with taxi companies to ensure that the people who need the transit can get it, as opposed to an empty 90 to 190-foot bus going every hour and picking up 2 passengers on suburban routes from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. That's what, again, creativity, innovation, and thinking, and working with the employee groups. Again, the city is not doing it, and they're letting us all down.
Okay. Look, it's been a great conversation. Just loved discussing these issues with the both of you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Rob, and nice talking to you, Walter.
Okay, bye-bye. Christine Leadman, Executive Director of the Bank Street BIA, former City Councillor for Kitchissippi Ward, and a longtime commentator on local affairs, and a former Chief of Staff to Mayor O'Brien. That's Walter Robinson. I'm Rob Snow. The Talkback Hour is coming up next here on City News.
In Ottawa.
And CJET 101.1 FM in Smith Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, February 18th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smith Falls, minus 15 degrees. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Federal health officials are providing an update on vaccinations across Canada, and we're expecting a big ramp up in the months ahead. City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney with more.
So far in Canada, 1.5 million doses of vaccines have been delivered to the provinces, with more than 1.3 million shots being administered. And while the feds expect to get their full deliveries by the end of March, their focus now turning to the second quarter, where we're expecting a huge ramp up in deliveries. Major General Danny Fortin.
We're expecting to receive 23 million doses from Pfizer and Moderna between April and June.
So that's just for our 2 approved vaccines. That number could jump significantly if the AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, and Novavax shots are also approved by Health Canada. In fact, the updated forecast says by the end of June, we could see between 38 and 64% of our population inoculated. Work is underway now with the provinces to try and help them prepare for this significant increase in deliveries. The National Advisory Board on Vaccines also updating its priority populations for the next stage of vaccinations. It's now suggesting provinces include priority for people in congregate living spaces and adults living in Indigenous communities. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
Now, we do have the latest COVID modeling numbers from the federal government coming out tomorrow. Now, Canada's top doctor says virus variants are spreading and efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 cannot be eased. Theresa Tam addressed the COVID situation this morning on breakfast television and says they're worried about the mutations of this virus.
Even more concerning is that some of them might impact the effectiveness of the vaccine. We're monitoring very closely, mainly through international data, on whether some of them could cause more severe illness as well.
Now, with evidence from the UK, the variant first detected there is potentially causing worse symptoms. So there is a great deal of interest and study. City News Time, 10:03. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
The clouds will increase as we work through the day. The high -4. Some flurries tonight, -10. Will feel like -15 overnight. And then for tomorrow, periods of snow, about 3 centimeters at this point. The high -4. That's our high for today, -4.
And right now in both Ottawa and Smith Falls, it's -15 degrees. The Ontario Financial Accountability Office says 2020 was the biggest job loss on record. The FAO says Ontario dropped 355,300 jobs in 2020. That represented an almost 5% drop in the employment rate. The report also says the pandemic also forced many employers to cut the hours of their staff, bringing the total number of jobs either lost or affected to over 765,000. The FAO also says job loss affected more women than men. City News Time, 10:04. A couple of area organizations which make a difference in the lives of youth will receive grants from Rogers Communications. The Boys and Girls Club of Ottawa and the Inuktitut Center of Inuit Children, Youth and Families will be receiving $20,000 each in Ted Rogers Community Grants. Since 2017, the grants from Rogers Communications have sent more than $150,000 to Ottawa area organizations. Rogers Communications is the parent company of this radio station. A NASA rover is hurtling towards landing on Mars in the riskiest step yet in an epic quest to bring rocks that could answer whether life ever existed on the red planet. NASA's Associate Science Administrator is Thomas Zurbuchen. He says there's a specific part of Mars where the best rock samples can be found.
We go to the most promising site to really unlock the information about that web past and the question, was there ancient life during that period where on Earth life was arising?
Now, scientists believe if life ever flourished on Mars, it would have happened 3 to 4 billion years ago when water still flowed on the planet. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Do you think It is right that OC Transpo is running at 100%. And by that, I mean it's fully staffed, right? 100% fully staffed. When ridership of public transit in the city of Ottawa is down between 80 and 90%. We learned that yesterday from the Transit Commission meeting. I mean, do you think that's right, to be fully staffed if your ridership is down 90%, as much as 90%? Or should OC Transpo be right-sized, I guess you could say, because of the pandemic? Look, we're not promoting joblessness and layoffs and misery, okay? But how about some fiscal prudence for the taxpayer to save some money for the city of Ottawa on operating what is a huge operation for the city of Ottawa? $640 million a year operation to run OC Transpo. And yet it's as though the pandemic has never even happened. How many calls I've taken over the last year? Why is this empty bus going around and around in my neighborhood all day? There's nobody on the thing. Just how long is this to continue? So 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. I'd love to hear from you on that, and I'm always down for a conversation about federal politics. There's a lot of election speculation that Justin Trudeau is going to have. This is how things are going to go, right? It's going to be a big shipment of vaccines in March, then a budget, and then we're going to call the election. Trudeau's going to call the election. But I would ask you today, I don't care who you're voting for. I'm not interested in who you're voting for. I have a good idea who you're not voting for. But look, just given the state of the pandemic, okay, the possibility of a third wave, vaccines and variants and the whole business, does it make sense to hold an election? You see Doug Ford getting all kinds of heck, reopening the economy. Well, what about having an election? And plus, we keep being told, stay apart, stay home, don't go anywhere. Well, if that's the case, should there really be an election? Or are you of the mind, look, the Americans had an election. They also had record voter turnout. If the United States can have an election, Canada, surely to goodness, can have an election. I'd like to know what you think on that. Allan Hubley, the chair of the Transit Commission, is going to join me a little later in the program. I mean, this business on OC Transpo has been an issue since the first lockdown. What is happening? People calling. People calling the Rob Snow Show? I love it. What is happening with OC Transpo? I started getting calls about this barely a week into the first lockdown when we thought, you remember, those were actually pretty optimistic times. Hey, we're all going into a 14-day lockdown, and then this will all be over. It'll all be over. I just need to lock down for 14 days. Remember those more optimistic days? Every now and then, though, people still call me or they drop me an email, and what do they ask? They keep asking the same question that they've been asking for the last year. Why do I see empty buses driving around my neighborhood? Why do I see near empty light rail trains snaking their way through an empty downtown core? Why is the city council allowing this to continue? How much is this costing us? Why isn't city council doing something about this? Questions along those lines. And I have put those questions to the mayor, and I have put those questions to the transit chair, and he'll join me again today, Allan Hubley. And the answers that come back, they're always the same. They're unconvincing, but they're always the same. We can't cut back OC Transpo. Too many people still rely on OC Transpo. It's hard to lay people off at OC Transpo because of language in collective bargaining agreements. It's safer the way it is now. It's safer. The safety argument is one. We need people to space out on the trains and the buses. Those are the answers that keep coming back. But look, it's been a year of this, okay? And I would like to know if you really think this is the right and proper approach with OC Transpo. It's running at basically 100%, right? Fully staffed, as though the pandemic never even happened. Is that the right and proper way to run a city on behalf of taxpayers? Very costly service, $640 million a year. Ridership down 80% system-wide, 90% for light rail. Is there another business where you lose 90% of your sales, but you open up the next day like nothing has ever happened? Fully staffed? As though rush hour for the bus system is the same as it's always been? It has never made a lot of sense to me, I have to say. It has never, but here's what I think is going on. I think they're all chicken. Because of the union, the ATU. It's a take no prisoners kind of union, very full of bluster and bravado. And I think the councillors and the mayor, they just don't want to deal with any grief that would almost assuredly come their way if they even thought about right-sizing the public transit system to pandemic ridership levels. Just my own view of it. Just my own view of it. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Lines available. Mark in Carp. Good morning.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
I just find it really amazing that we have these buses circling around Ottawa.
Sure.
And we've declared a climate emergency in Ottawa.
Climate emergency, sure, yeah.
But nobody seems to care. They're circling around. They're burning all kinds of fuel.
Yeah. Creating greenhouse gases, sir?
Exactly.
Yes.
And but if this was anything else, people would be all over it. For some reason, nobody's even talking about it. This is probably the worst thing that we could do for the climate, is have a whole bunch of big buses circling the city with nobody on them.
Empty. Empty, right? Empty.
Yes, and we all know that this is Jim Durrell's pet project, and I understand that, but
Jim Watson, you mean Jim Watson.
Jim Watson. I think he needs to swallow his pride a little bit on this one, completely look at our transit system in Ottawa and the future of it. We're going ahead with all kinds of light rail plans.
Yes, we are.
That could be going absolutely nowhere and be of no benefit to anybody.
Yeah.
And we just seem hell-bent on making this thing happen. And right now, if this was a business and you had your business was run like normal business,
sure,
and you had buses running around the city empty,
yep,
you would not be creating a business plan to sink more billions of dollars into it.
Yeah, great points, Mark. Thank you. Thank you for making them. Yeah, 750-1310, 750-1310 on OC Transpo. It's one of the most expensive city services that we have. I think only the police service costs more than OC Transpo. Or OC Transpo might be the most expensive public service in the city of Ottawa. I'd have to look at the numbers. It's like 1-2, OC Transpo and the police. Will, Kanata.
Yeah.
What do you think, Will?
Well, it's like, okay, you're going to ask me why, Will. Well, it's not why, Will, this time Patrick Brown. Why, Will, Patrick Brown? Well, we fix that situation. Why are you saying keep it running as it is? Because it would cost the lawyers, okay, like the lawyers are going to come out for all these people that they're going to permanently lay off, permanently down structure the schedule for OC Transpo, all the buses out here and in the other suburbs, and you're going to put them down to one bus every 2 hours or some ridiculous thing. Going to lower the, people have to get out to these essential businesses to do their shopping.
Sure.
They don't want to start up a car and, burn all that, like the other fellow was saying, burn all that fuel that, because I live near Carp too. So,
okay.
The Coupe de Carp. So, I mean, I'm just saying, why spend all that money, okay? And then,
well, the idea, I think, Will, with all due respect, Will, I think the idea is to not spend all that money. That's the goal here, would be to achieve some kind of rationalization. The fact is, we have a public service being provided. It used to be very popular, but right now it's not very popular, and yet we're running it as though it's as popular as ever. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense to a whole heck of a lot of people. And I'm one of them. Are you one of them? If so, give me a call, and if not, give me a call too. 750-1310, Talkback Hour on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
When you've lost your breasts, you've sort of lost part of yourself. And then all at once, you're losing your hair. You don't know who you are anymore. You want to feel like yourself again. So I think that the store, a mastectomy store, is essential because you've lost your identity. And then all at once, you're looking for a wig, you need a headscarf, you need a camisole. There's nowhere to go. There's no one to talk to. This should be essential because there are more and more women that are getting breast cancer. I think it's 1 in 6. They're becoming younger. I have a client that's 18 years old. And where do they go? They need a place like this that the women that work there understand. They know what you're going through. It's changed quite a bit. Our hours are different. We're now open from 10 to 5. We're not as busy as we were. A lot of women are afraid to go out. They're afraid that maybe there are more people in the store. So that's why I try and let them know you are alone. There's absolutely nobody in the store except you and I. If there is a woman that she's very afraid, I will lock the door to make sure nobody else comes in. I'll put a sign back in 10, 15 minutes just to give her that reassurance. Before we would have 4, 5, 6 people in the store. We didn't have to turn anybody away. Now we do. Some clients do leave and they're upset because they're in the store. They said, you know, we drove 20 minutes and now we're not allowed in the store. And I try to make them understand that there's somebody in here that's going through chemo or radiation. So that's sort of changed a lot, that we're not able to have more people in the store.
If we're talking about products, there's the bras that are adapted for mastectomy. The bathing suits that are adapted to mastectomy. We have special camisoles as well, and post-surgery bras. And then we have, for women going through chemo, the wigs that we have a big selection in the store as well. We have scarves. Some women don't feel comfortable wearing a wig. They prefer to wear a scarf or a hat, so we have a huge selection of that as well. We offer compression garments as well. When you're going through a mastectomy, you might have lymphedema in your arms after a couple of years, and you have flare-ups. So we have the sleeves, the hand as well that can be covered. We show each other's our scar. We talk about the treatments, how we felt, and I guess that's what they're looking for here. That's what makes us special. We have an added value in this store. Besides everything that's in the store, that's a product that can handle any problem that a client might have. Me and Linda, we've been through. We know how it feels in our bodies.
The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
I mean, OC Transmo up until this point, more or less it's been untouchable, right? You're not allowed to touch it. It's sacred. Hands off that articulated bus. It's sacred. You may be allowed to fiddle around with the operation, but certainly nothing is ever going to stop the money flowing, the billions being borrowed, as our previous caller said, to finance this new light rail system, which is now, you could argue all based upon a very uncertain business case. We have OC Transpo is very deep in the red. The deficit to run it is maybe, as high as $60 million. That is still real money, right? That's a lot of money, $60 million. It's more than the Lotto Max. The next Lotto Max is like $40 million. It's only $60 million, you'd never hear from me again. Still a lot of money. But yesterday at the Transit Commission, all they can come up with is these really token money-saving measures, modest as they are, still meeting resistance, right? Cutting one train, really? To save a few $100,000? Gosh, last week all it took was a few snowflakes and you put a train out of service. It's hardly, some kind of great cost-cutting measure. I think, and look, you know it, ladies and gentlemen, okay? Those of you who have been listening for the last year, the operation should be right-sized. I have said for the period in which it's operating, the pandemic period, and that is City Council's job, is to shield taxpayers from needless expense, not to avoid tough decisions because it doesn't want to upset loud union leadership. But so far, all this council has done is just cross its fingers and hope that Catherine McKenna, the powerful Trudeau cabinet minister, will come through with some federal money to bail them out. And honest to goodness, that's passing the buck. It's not leadership and it's not a strategy. Ottawa is not an island, and other city governments have made these decisions already. Tough decisions. But Calgary had to cut 500 public transit jobs. The TTC let go about the same number of people and said everyone will be called back to work when ridership comes back to 50% of pre-COVID levels. 1,500 public transit staff let go in Vancouver. I'm not cheering any of this. None of this puts a smile on my face, but it's about the fiscal reality. And the unfortunate circumstance that the city finds itself in. The New York transit system is in such bad shape that it was looking at cutting 40% of its service, its rail service, and 10,000 jobs. In a city much more reliant on public transit than what we are in this city, in New York City. I mean, it has a public transit culture. Here, it's just like you have a city council is just living in La La Land, like on Fantasy Island, where the pandemic never happened. And when it comes to the transit system, it's just status quo. Whatever the real world is facing, in the Saint Laurent bus garage, it doesn't exist. So I put it to you again this morning. Is this really an acceptable use of taxpayers' money to run OC Transpo as though the pandemic has not occurred and ridership is really not down 90%? Is that acceptable to you as a property taxpayer in Ottawa? Richard, Orleans.
Rob, it's certainly not acceptable to me at all. And the second thing, this is the same city council that yelled climate emergency.
Sure, yeah.
Well, how can they be saying, let's run the buses and everything with nobody on them? Isn't that goes against the climate emergency? I
would suggest to you, yes, it does, yes.
The other thing is their budget. They created a budget with, again, a 3% increase and not taking into account all the people that have lost their jobs and that are having trouble just paying their mortgages, and yet they increased the city budget by 3% again.
3%, yeah. Yeah.
Did they ever consider
And they raised the fares for public transit as well.
Well, this is it. Like, it's not their money, so they don't really care, and they don't know how to be fiscally responsible because it's not their money. So they keep on spending, and they keep on ignoring the plight of their constituents.
Okay.
You know, the person may lose his house, but their taxes will go up 3%. Now, why wouldn't they even at least consider cutting the councillor's budget by 20% to show that they are aware of what people are going through?
Okay. All right. Thank you, Richard. Thank you. Thank you. I understand what you're saying, sir. Thank you. I'm going to move along here. 750-1310. Take a couple of calls before the halftime show. Mike in Ottawa. Mike.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, Mike. Does it make sense to you to be operating OC Transpo like this?
Well, here's the thing.
All right.
You know, if they lay people off, our taxes aren't going to be decreased. It's, you know, we've paid for it anyway. It's an essential service. You know, we don't start laying off police officers because the crime rate has gone down. We don't lay off fire personnel because of the dropping fire calls. We've paid for this service anyway.
We've paid for the service anyway.
With our taxes. You know,
sure,
our taxes are not going to go down because we lay off some bus personnel, right?
Well, do you not think there would be cost savings if we removed buses from the fleet, sir?
But are your taxes going to go down? Because that's basically, what is funding OC Transpo.
Okay. So do you work at OC Transpo, Mike?
No, I don't.
You don't work there?
No.
Are you telling me the truth, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't work there. You don't work there. Does your wife work there? Your husband work there? Do you have a family member? Your father? Your son? Whatever? No vested interest at all. No conflict of interest to declare.
No. I'm just saying It's an essential service, just like other essential services. We don't reduce the police budget. We don't reduce.
It hasn't been declared an essential service.
Well, it is.
Well, if it's an essential service, Mike, how come what year was that? 2009, I think. How come they went on strike in the middle of a winter if it was so essential?
Well, yeah, you're right, but for people that rely on it. To get to work.
Yeah, sure. Mike, I used to be one of those people. I was one of those people for a very long time when I was a much younger man. Okay, I used to ride the bus from one end of the city to the other and knew the routes like the back of my hand. But the fact is, would my bus now have to come? Say my bus comes every 15 minutes. Does that same bus still need to come every 15 minutes? Or could we get by if that bus came by every 30 minutes right now?
Well, I mean, it should...
For the one or two people that are going to be on it for the entirety of its route, Mike.
Well, here's the thing. Depending on the neighborhood that it's in, it's just an essential service, and, you shouldn't be touching it.
It's not an essential service, Mike.
Well, legally it's not, but really for a lot of folks it is.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you, Mike. Thanks. Bye. Okay. Don't cut it. Steve, Westboro.
Yep, I think they should cut the buses very much.
Very much, okay.
Very much, and I think Jim Watson should resign.
Well, okay, all right. That's not really the question for today, but, maybe we got closer to the election. But you think it should be right-sized. I'm using the term right-sized, not because I want people to lose their job or anything, Steve, but, some reality here, right? Oh, Steve has just hung up on me. Okay, let's take one more before halftime. Matt in Nepean, a wonderful place to be in. Matt.
How you doing, Rob?
Good. You're an operator.
That is correct.
Should we lay you off?
Well, you can, but it's not going to save you any money.
Not going to save me any money, okay.
No. Now,
how is it not going to save me any money if I don't have to pay you?
Okay.
Explain that, and I don't have to put fuel in your bus.
Okay, so you're right. You don't have to put fuel in my bus, and that fuel, which has already been paid for, because we buy contracts for fuel.
Yeah. Is the fuel going to go bad? Is the fuel going to go bad? We can put the fuel in the snowplow, whatever. It's just fuel, Mike. It's not. It doesn't have to go specifically in your bus.
You're right. And you can save it for next year and whatnot, but you will not see any initial savings, and the actual tax savings, like the gentleman said before, was very minimal. But the more important issue is this: one of the biggest reasons why we want to keep as many buses as we can on the road is to keep the social distancing.
The social distancing, yes, I've heard this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I know that I drive for 9 hours a day, and I drive 12 routes during those 9 hours. And most of them, you're right, are pretty empty, particularly the connection routes, the ones that were the old express routes.
Right.
Because there's nobody going downtown anymore.
Sure, yeah.
However, you do have bus routes like the 75, the 74, the ones that go out, say, to Barhaven, or the 39 that goes out to Millennium in that area, that are at times almost standing loads. In other words, they're not full, but they have a good quantity of the seats filled, and people are opting to stand because they can't get a spot that's far enough away from somebody else, or don't want to share a seat.
Well, see, then I want to look at the management of this whole operation if that is happening.
And you're right.
If ridership is down 80 to 90%, which is what Mr. Charter said yesterday at this Transit Commission meeting, then why are people standing on a bloody bus, for crying out loud? It doesn't make any sense.
This is the bigger question. Is right now we've got the system set up as if the government is in place, as if the full schools are full, universities and colleges are in full enrollment. And that's not the case. But we do have people still using the bus. On line number 6 down Bank Street, that's still a very busy route, relatively speaking. As I said, 75 and 74 are still busy enough that you can't just say, well, I'm going to cut it, down to...
Yeah, we're not, I'm not talking about cutting
20%.
Whatever, the number 6 or the number 4 or the number 3 or the number 7. I'm not saying cut the route. I'm saying, does that bus have to come every 10 minutes, Matt?
Well, but this is the thing. If you take out, let's say the bus right now is coming every 10 minutes. Let's say a 75. It's coming every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And you decide you're going to make it every 15. Well, that means that you're now adding 50%. Potentially to the capacity or to the usage of each bus.
50%. What if there's only 6 people on the bus?
Right, but
Come on. I got to run, Matt. The news is coming up, and I'm getting the evil eye from Andrew. We'll be back after halftime. City News.
At Kiss 105. News in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, February 18th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, minus 10 degrees, and here's what's making news this hour. Latest numbers from the province on COVID cases shows 1,038 new ones, along with 44 more deaths reported today. There are 37 new cases in Ottawa, 8 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. Both Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and Renfrew County are reporting no new cases. In the hotspots, it's Toronto leading with 376. Federal modeling numbers for COVID-19 are going to be released tomorrow. Canada's top doctor, Theresa Tam, told Breakfast Television this morning they're concerned about the variants of the virus becoming or because of easier transmission. She says you should have the fewest interactions with the fewest people with the greatest distance between you for the shortest period of time. That will halt its progress. Tam also says a third wave is very possible if we don't continue with protective measures. The federal government also updating the vaccine situation in our country through Q2, so from March till the end of June, we could have enough vaccine to inoculate 64% of the population. An update from the National Advisory Panel on Vaccines says provinces should give the shots to people living in congregate spaces and Indigenous communities first. City News Time, 10:34. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
We're talking about OC Transpo and if OC Transpo should be running at 100% capacity, fully staffed. If its ridership is down 90%, and it's been a lively discussion so far. If you want to pick up on that, by all means. I would also like to introduce another topic, and that's the timing of the next federal election. Now, I'm still betting there's going to be an election. before the summer. I'm not really a betting man, but if I was, that's where I'd put my money. I think the good money is on April, May, June, sometime in there. My question for you, though, listeners to the Rob Snow Show today, is not who you're going to vote for. I think I have a good idea. Or who do you think will win? I also think you have a good idea. My question for you is, should there even be an election, given the state of the pandemic? Or should the leaders do whatever they can to avoid sending Canadians to the polls during a pandemic? Do you think it's an appropriate course of action to hold an election given where we are with this virus and all the unknowns with the virus? I had a chance this morning to speak with Dr. Deonandan from the University of Ottawa. He's an epidemiologist, and he's quite concerned about where we are with this virus right now. There's a lot of unknowns about these variants. But I would like to know, what do you think? Given where we are with the virus, should we even have an election? Yes or no? Why not? Let's get into this. I mean, think about what all the stuff we're hearing, third waves and variants, and now we have this new one, recombinants. That's a new word now, fancy new pandemic word, recombinant. Add that to your COVID vocabulary. Recombinant. That's what happens when variants merge. The variants merge, and then they become recombinants. Wow, isn't that lovely? It's like science fiction come to life. Right? Invasion of the recombinants. Directed by Ron Howard. Starring George Clooney. Look, if the health officials don't think it's safe to reopen the economy, just even a tiny crack, well, then does it really make sense to be holding an election? I guess that's one way to look at it. 750-1310, 750-1310, a national election, right? People going to voting centers and community centers and lining up to cast their vote in a federal election. Is that really in the best interest of the country, a Canada-wide election? What do you think? What do you think, listeners to the Rob Snow Show? I'd love to get your opinion on this at 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. While I wait for some calls, let's listen to a little bit of the Queen's Park question period.
To not end the stay-at-home orders and the lockdowns. The medical officer of health for Peel, Lawrence Lowe, says this, and I quote, "I'm very concerned about the tenuous situation that we find ourselves in," and Dr. Lowe was backed up by the Mayor of Mississauga, Bonnie Crombie. Eileen Davila, the medical officer of health for Toronto, says this, quote, "I have never been as worried about the future as I am today." And Mayor Tory, of course, backed up Dr. Davila. Dr. Davila, Dr. Lowe, Mayor Tory, Mayor Crombie are all imploring this Premier to do the right thing, to slow down the reopening. Will he finally start listening to them?
The Deputy Premier and Minister of Health.
Premier's not in the legislature right now. It's Christine Elliott.
What we're looking at is not a reopening. We're looking at a transition back to the framework that we had before the stay-at-home order was brought forward. This has been contemplated with careful thought that we need to do this very gradually, very carefully, particularly with the variants of concern in operation right now. I know that they are spreading across the province, so we have to be very, very careful. We do have the emergency brake that we can bring forward in any situation, any part of Ontario where the cases are growing exponentially, particularly due to the variants of concern, that will then put that region back into grey or lockdown area zone. But with respect to the comments made by Dr. Davila and Dr. Lowe, that is something that we are taking very carefully and considering very carefully. Dr. Williams is in frequent contact with both of those positions. There is a new load of data that is coming in tonight. It's going to determine the recommendation that Dr. Williams will be making to the government with respect to the situation for both Peel and Toronto.
Okay. Thank you, David. Thank you. So I think that dovetails nicely with our very own topic. I mean, there you have Andrea Horvath. No apology to her today for the nails on a chalkboard comment yesterday from Premier Ford. But nevertheless, she's outlining the expressions of concern from these chief medical officers of health in the GTA in Toronto and Peel. They're saying to the Premier, please don't end the lockdown, extend it for another 2 weeks. Well, if that's the case, and because of all the uncertainty, we shouldn't be reopening the economy, and that's 4.3 million people live in Toronto and Peel. Well, how prudent is it then to really be thinking about calling an election? And believe you me, Mr. Trudeau is thinking about calling an election. I'm just asking. Okay. Chris Almont. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Rob.
Yes, sir. But do you think it's appropriate to have an election?
It's certainly not appropriate.
Okay.
It's the wrong time.
Okay.
However, that's exactly why I think he's going to try. Because the next set of questions is going to come on the budget, the spending for COVID, and he doesn't want to face that. So
sooner rather than later, you're thinking, Chris.
Oh yeah. Because the later it goes on, the more this drags on, the worse it looks for him. And I think he's going to go as soon as he can.
Yeah, and there could be additional unforeseen problems with the vaccine rollout, right?
Exactly, and this is not getting better. It's getting worse for him, and the sooner he has an election, the better. And they may just try, like our friends down south, to take advantage of mail-in voting to stuff boxes. You never know.
Well, I don't know about that, but okay, Chris, I got you. Okay. Here's how some people think it's going to play out. Okay, Don Martin, actually, very good column for ctvnews.ca. And he's not alone in thinking this is how it's going to play out. Okay. You see the Liberals and Mr. Trudeau, what they're doing right now. They're going through I call it their pre-election checklist. These are the things we have to take care of before we trigger the election. That's why we're getting all these nothing burger announcements. The announcements for the sake of making announcements, to placate their different constituencies, right? They're not actually doing anything. It's just more promises from the Liberals that, someday, some decade far off into the future, we'll eventually do something about whatever happens to be fashionable at the time. So you get an announcement on public transit. They say it's massive investment, a historic investment, blah, 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 yada, 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 yada. The money that they're promising, they wouldn't even start to spend it for another 5 years, right? I guess using that time frame, they can promise it again for the election after this one. But the Liberals want that green, lefty, environmental vote, so they come up with these announcements, right? Historic investment in public transit. Gun control is another one, right? Liberal plan for gun control. Another nothing burger. No meat, no bun. You don't even get a plant-based patty with that announcement. It's so stupid. It's not going to do anything to cut down on gun crime in Toronto. Nothing. Matt Gurney with an excellent analysis in the Post this week. But the Liberals want to make it look as though they're doing something to get tough on gun crime in Toronto. So what are they going to do? Are they going to do anything? No, they're going to boot it over to John Tory and his lefty buddies on the city council there to ban handguns. And then just hope nobody gets shot anymore while they're shopping on Boxing Day on Yonge Street. Just another announcement for the sake of making an announcement. They do the net zero carbon emissions thing. They gave people a break on the CERB, right? The self-employed confusion about the CERB. You don't have to pay the money back. If you've paid the money back, we'll refund whatever you've paid back. And everyone else who's having a tax issue because of CERB, you have a year's grace to work everything out with the Canada Revenue Agency because we don't want the CRA messing with our election campaign, right? That is a major pre-election signal right there. Making it easier for immigrants to obtain permanent residency. There's another one. And if anything, they're just getting warmed up, right? The budget is coming. You're going to have the same old tired Liberal promises stolen from the NDP wish list, pharmacare, child care. And then there's going to be a big rollout of Liberal MPs announcing funding for projects in their own ridings. But is all of this is the pre-election strategy, but is it right to be having an election at all, given the state of the virus? Given the state of the virus. Okay. Leo, Ottawa. Good morning, Leo. Leo? Hello, Leo.
Hello.
Yes, Leo.
Yes, Rob, I'm a first-time caller.
Well, I appreciate that.
I've been listening to your show for a while now, and it's a pretty good show.
Well, thank you, Leo. Thank you for calling today and saying those kind words. Leo, given the state of the virus, do you think we should have an election? Is it safe?
Yes, I do.
Yeah?
Yes, I do, because if we don't have this election, they're going to win again, and if the Liberals win again, it's just going to be just a big mess. The thing is that so much has happened over the last 4 years. All the scandal after scandal after scandal. It hasn't stopped, and it isn't going to stop.
Yeah. Well,
it's like a guy who's a criminal, okay? He's going to be a repeat offender, and he's going to keep doing it and doing it. He's never going to learn his lesson until they get him out. So I think it's time for him to go.
Well, you may think that it's time for him to go. There's no indication that Canadians are going to, kick him out or send him to prison or whatever it is that you think should happen to him and his team. But I guess I'm just asking: is it safe? Is it prudent? Is it the right thing to do? Just given where we are with the pandemic, I mean, people are talking about third waves that are going to be worse than the second wave, which was worse than the first. So that's what I'm wondering.
But I mean, there must be another way. Like we could, like in the United States, you could vote. You could send your
remote voting, vote by mail. Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. If people can't go, are too afraid to go to the community centers to vote, they could do it that way.
Yeah.
There's other ways they can arrange the voting.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I hear you, Leo. And that's a very good argument that you make. And I thank you for being a first-time caller to the Rob Snow Show. I really do appreciate that. The Americans had an election. Not only did they have an election, they had record voter turnout, right? If they can do it, so can we. Absolutely. Great point. 750-1310, final quarter of the Rob Snow Show. Talkback hour is coming up on City News.
No Nut Butter is a business where we make allergy-friendly spreads, so alternatives to peanut butter, Nutella, or those kind of things that kids and adults like to have on toast or on a banana or on an apple, and aren't really available to people with severe food allergies or allergies to the top allergens. When you're an allergy parent, you read every label because you need to know the details of every ingredient that's in the products that you're going to feed your kid. So we found that a lot of the products that we were looking at may contain warnings, which we can't have, and had just so many ingredients in them that you don't know if there's a weird unknown ingredient that is kind of disguised under a different name. So we started No Nut Butter so that we would have the opportunity to have products that were safe and free from the top allergens and had really simple ingredients in them so that you would know exactly what you were feeding your kids. We make 4 different products at No Nut Butter. So we make a pumpkin seed butter, which is our alternative to peanut butter. So it only has pumpkin seeds, roasted pumpkin seeds, and some kind of oil in it. So we usually use corn oil or olive oil. And then we make what we call Choco Pumpkin, and it is our alternative to a chocolate hazelnut spread. So it is our pumpkin seed butter with our chocolate spread, so very much chocolate hazelnut spread. We make a coconut caramel, so it is coconut milk and sugar, and it is our kind of vegan option for caramel, because typically caramel has lots of butter and dairy in it. And then we make an apple butter, which is apples and cinnamon and sugar, and that's it. We do also make a sugar-free pumpkin seed butter option because we have some diabetics and just some people who don't want sugar in their lives, and so we do offer that, but you'd have to custom order it. There are very strict rules around producing products, particularly nut-free products. You aren't allowed to cook in your own kitchen, which makes a lot of sense. If you have a dog, you don't want to cook in your own kitchen. But from a nut standpoint, it's just making sure that you have everything really clean and organized So we cook all of our products in a commercial kitchen so that we can keep all of those health and safety procedures really tight and together. My personal business started a company called Shop Local Ontario during the pandemic, so we were pretty well equipped to go forward into the pandemic in a world of e-commerce and transacting online. You can find us online at nonutbutter.com, or you can find us on Facebook, No Nut Butter, or on Instagram at No Nut Butter.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Talking about the operations of OC Transpo. Fully staffed, even though ridership is down 90%, and we were also talking about the timing of a federal election. Should we even be considering having a federal election? I mean, we're warned constantly about the third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. Jim, North Gore, thanks for calling. Jim, you're on the air.
Yeah, the thing about OC Transpo, I mean, the biggest mistake they ever made is when they took it out of the private hands and the city took over. It should be privately run.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, not really the question for today, and I don't think we're ever going to be privatizing OC Transpo anytime soon. But should it be? All I'm asking is that bus that is right now coming every 7 minutes or every 10 minutes. You know, couldn't we get by if we have ridership down 90%? Couldn't that bus come every 15 minutes?
It's just nonsense. I mean,
right?
What is it that you have to have a bus? I mean, when I first started work, now that's a lot of years ago, I knew when I was going in on the 4 to 12 shift that I had no way to get home. Like, I didn't have a car and whatnot. I knew that when I finished at midnight, I had to walk home.
Right.
But it was a good job. It paid well, and it was just part of the game. Why do I, as a taxpayer, have to ensure that you get to work?
Oh, I see.
I mean,
okay.
Come on, kid. But I mean, that's the changing times. Well, I mean, it just makes it like we shouldn't be paying you. You want to get to work, that's part of your problem, not mine.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right. Find your own way to work, Jim, you're saying.
Come on.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
all right,
you buy a big house and you get in a mortgage.
Well, I think a lot of people, at this stage of the game, Jim, with all due respect, I think a lot of the people who are relying on OC Transpo, like the 10% taking light rail or the 18% that are taking the bus every day, they're not living in McMansions, okay?
Yeah,
on a golf course somewhere. I get it, Jim. I get it. It's not the Kanata Lakes crowd, okay? Okay, I gotta go. I gotcha. Barry. Good morning, Barry. No, Barry's not there. Gotta go, Barry. Sorry, you're slow on the draw. I got to let you go. Not too many calls to get to here. Marie. Good morning, Marie.
Yeah, good morning, Rob. I'll be swift. Been around this game for a long time. Yeah. I think we're definitely going to be into an election, and Trudeau will call it.
Yeah.
Even though he said, what did he say to the Conservatives and the NDP? Yeah, they're going to call an election. We're definitely going to have one in my books, and there'll be a lot of mail-in ballots, and does anybody want this Liberal government to handle mail-in ballots? I don't think so. That's my opinion, and I just hope I'm wrong, that he will have more sense than to call an election at this time. Just take a look at what happened in Newfoundland. And
in Newfoundland they're kind of having two elections, okay? Well, the election was supposed to be this weekend, right? Saturday, I think, was supposed to be election day, and then all of a sudden the chief electoral officer says, let's not have the election in half of the ridings.
Exactly.
On election day, right? On election day.
Exactly. Yeah, it'll be the biggest screw up. And no doubt a lot of people are saying that I talk to, because we're kind of always in preparing for things. And everybody I talk to says, it'll be worked out that he will probably get a majority government if he works it well enough. I just hope Canadians are a lot smarter than that, and I think they are.
Yeah, but do you think there should be an election, given the virus? Like Doug Ford, they're pounding Doug Ford for opening the economy just a teeny tiny little bit. Can you really reward a government that plunges us all into an election?
Just go back and read what Trudeau said when the NDP said they probably couldn't support, and we were all upset because the NDP supported whatever, and then he was on to the Conservatives about they want an election, not us, who wants an election now? It'll be, I would say, the middle of June.
Middle of June. All right. Okay, Marie, thank you. I mean, the thrust of Martin's column this week is, this is how it's all going to play out. The vaccines are going to arrive. People will get vaccinated again. It's all going to be all over the 6 o'clock newscasts, right, from coast to coast to coast. Oh, there's Aunt Betty, and there's Uncle Harry, and there's Cousin Ruth, and there's Grandma, and they're all getting their vaccines, right? And boom, snap. Mr. Trudeau goes to see whoever you're supposed to see these days, whoever the Governor General happens to be, because didn't he do such a great job picking the first one? And he's going to say, here is my bold vision for Canada, and I need a mandate from the Canadian people, and we're off to the races voting in May or June. And Liberals in a landslide, massive majority, 4 more years, Prime Minister Trudeau. Very credible scenario, but it doesn't make the pandemic go away. That's the thing. Logan in Ottawa. Logan.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, Logan. Thank you. How about yourself?
Not too bad.
I'm glad to hear that. Okay.
Whether or not it's a good idea is irrelevant, because
it's irrelevant.
The whole government has been a series of bad ideas, one after the other. I feel like the Liberal supporters have just have the attention span of a goldfish, where they forget what happened yesterday. But it's a smart idea on his part, because he knows he's going to get a majority out of it, and he knows by waiving the CERB, whatever you want to call it, forgiveness program and all the other...
Yeah, like a tax grace period or whatever, right? Yeah.
Everything. This Liberal government is full of false promises and ignorance, especially when it comes down to the gun reform and everything else that they're tabling right now. It's just a bunch of virtue signaling. So whether or not it's a good idea is, like I said, it's irrelevant. It's a good idea on his side. It's a smart move, because he's going to get a majority and he'll be able to push through whatever he needs to.
So you think there's an election coming, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't think enough people follow these things close enough to. And it's in part, I think it's part of our educational system as well. Like if kids were taught a little bit more about what's going on in the world, we might have a better voting class. Or people who are more
all right.
important.
Yeah. Conversation for another day, perhaps. Thank you. Look, we're out of time. We got to right this ship, and then we're going to write OC Transpo. Okay. Tomorrow's the Friday free-for-all, so it's wide open during the talkback hour for our friends Barry and Eric. We'll get to your calls tomorrow, I'm sure. Love to hear from you tomorrow. News coming up. Rob Snow Show, City News.
WW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 101.1 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, February 18th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, minus 10 degrees, feeling slightly colder in the wind. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. We have the latest numbers from the province on COVID cases. 1,038 additional cases today, along with 44 more deaths province-wide. There are 37 new cases in Ottawa, 8 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. Both Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and the Renfrew District are reporting no new cases today. In the hotspots, it's Toronto with 376 new cases. Canada's Chief Public Health Officer says a third wave of COVID-19 is a real possibility. City News reporter Mike Lloyd with more on Dr. Theresa Tam, who made the warning in a preview of tomorrow's federal modelling numbers being released.
Dr. Tam spoke on breakfast television on City, saying that modeling will be released tomorrow morning, and it will show that the virus variants are spreading more easily across the country, and there's a real risk of a resurgence of COVID if people ease off too quickly on measures meant to help stop that spread. That includes keeping interactions to an absolute minimum.
People should, as much as possible, have the fewest interactions with the fewest people for the shortest time at the greatest distance. Of course, there are, in situations where you can't avoid that, then of course layer on all the personal protective measures.
Dr. Tam says there are concerns about the variants, the ongoing mutations, the spread among school-age children. They're monitoring data about severity of illness. She says we need to remain vigilant and not let up on public health measures. I'm Mike Lloyd.
So what about vaccines? 1.5 million have been delivered through the country, and the federal government preparing for a significant increase in inoculations in the months ahead. City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney now with more on the latest vaccine forecast from federal officials.
The government's been saying for weeks we'll be seeing a big vaccination push in the second quarter, and now we have a better idea of what that may look like. From our 2 approved vaccines, we're expecting to get around 5 million more doses than first expected, which means by the end of June, we could see as many as 14.5 million people receiving the shot. However, if the AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, and Novavax candidates get the green light in time, as many as 24.5 million people could be vaccinated by the end of Q2. Deputy Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Howard New also says the National Advisory Committee on Vaccines is updating its priority suggestions for provinces for the next round of shots.
Are individuals in congregate living and work settings. These individuals are at higher risk of contracting COVID-19. Adults in Indigenous communities where infection can have disproportionate consequences.
Of course, all of these are just estimates, and they do come with risks. We've already seen delivery disruptions, and they remain a possibility. There are also growing concerns about a third wave related to the COVID variants that are quickly spreading through the country. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time 11:03. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
The clouds will increase as we work through the day. The high -4. Some flurries tonight, -10. Will feel like -15 overnight. And then for tomorrow, periods of snow, about 3 centimeters at this point. The high -4. That's our high for today, -4.
And right now in both Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it's -10 degrees. 2 area organizations which make a difference in the lives of youth are receiving grants from Rogers Communications. The Boys and Girls Club of Ottawa and the Inuktitut Centre for Inuit Children, Youth and Families will each receive $20,000 in Ted Rogers Community Grants. Now, since 2017, these grants from Rogers Communications have sent more than $150,000 to local organizations. Rogers Communications is the parent company of this radio station. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Kanata Area Councillor Chair of the Transit Commission, Allan Hubley. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Great to hear from you, Councillor. I hope you're well these days.
Doing my best, buddy, and I hope the same for you.
I would like to begin. We're going to talk a lot about the operations of OC Transpo, but Kelly Egan had a column this week that has prompted a lot of reaction about a woman who was basically left at the side of the road because she didn't want to share the backseat of an OC Transpo, Paratranspo sedan. What's being done at Paratranspo to make sure something like that never happens again?
Well, what's been done right away was the general manager issued a directive to staff that it's only to be one person in the vehicle unless it's the attendant and the person wants their attendant with them.
Like an attendant, you mean? What do you mean?
If you were...
like a personal attendant?
Yeah, a personal care worker, or often referred to as an attendant. Depending on your disability, if you need assistance with day-to-day activities, then it's a qualified position.
Right. So you're confident then, Councillor, that something like that is not going to repeat itself?
Well, I would certainly hope so with the directive order. You see, what we had to do, what the general manager did as well, is consult with Ottawa Public Health to see, how can we do this, because there are examples of where there needs to be more than one person in the car. And so this was the language that they came up with, and so that's the order that's in there. We certainly hope every employee understands what the order is and will follow it as instructed.
Okay. Let's get to the overall operations of OC Transpo. What is being done to save on operational costs at OC Transpo?
Well, we have another report coming next month for the next meeting, which is going to lay out, if you remember last fall, I know you and I talked about it, we had a report come forward to the Commission which said, we have funding to the end of March. If that funding isn't extended, then, we're going to do Plan A, B, or C here, with C being the most drastic of cuts. B, I believe, was mainly canceling capital projects and things that could be delayed till later.
Right.
So that report will come back to the Commission next month. We're hoping to have some indication from the federal government if there will be any further COVID support for the transit system. And that will certainly lead to a lively discussion as what's the next steps.
Well, aren't the next steps obvious, though, Councillor? With all due respect,
yeah. Absolutely,
come on.
Rob.
Mr. Charter said yesterday, if you'll just permit me,
sure,
that your ridership for OC Transpo in January was 18% service-wide.
Yeah.
18%, Councillor.
We were in a lockdown, Rob.
Sure. But you never know it. You'd never know it looking at OC Transpo that there was a lockdown. There's certainly no lockdown at OC Transpo, and less than 10% ridership on light rail, and yet OC Transpo is like this untouchable sacred ground where never a cut is to be found. When is it going to dawn on the members of the Transit Commission and the broader City Council that this is just not prudent fiscally, Councillor? You are on the record many times, Councillor, saying that you are a fiscal conservative. This is not very fiscally prudent. This is not looking out for the taxpayer. How do you explain this?
Well, decisions were made at the start of the pandemic. Keep in mind, no one knew at the time how long the pandemic was going to last. But based on recommendations from public health, it was decided to keep the system running at its capacity so that there would be room to physically distance on the buses to reduce the chance of our riders getting COVID or our employees getting COVID. And that decision was supported by the federal and provincial government with funding to allow us to keep that going for the essential workers and people that absolutely rely on transit to get to where they're going. Now, you're right, the ridership number is down. It's not sustainable, and that's why next month the decisions are going to have to be made. We made a choice in the fall to say, okay, let's wait till March. If there's no funding past March, then we have to do the part of the job that nobody wants to do, and that's going to be make the deep cuts.
And what would that look like, for example? For example, people are calling me, and look, I'm sure you're getting the same calls I'm getting. Councillor, or your staff, why is it this empty bus going around my neighborhood? Why when I'm driving on the Queensway do I see a light rail train, with nobody on it, or 2 or 3 people on a train with 3 or 4 cars, right? Doesn't make they're wondering. So, what I have said to them, I'm not calling for entire routes to be cut or anything like this, but what are you looking at? For example, a bus that comes every 7 minutes or every 10 minutes, does that bus need to come with that frequency? Just what kind of things are you looking at here?
That's certainly a piece of it, but I can tell you that staff are looking at everything. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things we're going to look at right off the bat, and there's a list of them already that the Transit Commission will have available to it, which is capital projects. Like where we were going to make investments. We're going to have to look at making some big cuts into that. If the projection, we still don't know when the federal public service, for example, is going to come back to work, because that's a big basis of our ridership. Students is another part, and as you know, most universities are working online right now, and so there isn't a huge take-up on the student pass, for example. And until we know what's happening with these people, if we mothball the whole system and lay off all the staff...
Well, nobody. Come on, Councillor. Nobody's saying you have to mothball the whole system or lay off the whole staff, but it doesn't really make sense to staff an operation at 100% if 90% of your customers are not there. It does not make any sense.
That's right, and that's
they're not doing that at Air Canada. They're not doing that at Air Canada, Councillor.
That's true. They're doing their layoff route system this month, and they've already stopped a lot of their routes. That's a different system altogether. But those are the choices, Rob, that our whole city is going to be faced with next month if the decision is made that we have to start cutting back service. It's going to be what routes are going to get cut. Are they going to only get cut, as you suggested, instead of a frequency of every 15 minutes? What if the bus only comes by every half hour? Can that still... take care of the people that...
Could you have Sunday service on some routes, for example, the Sunday schedule or what have you, right? Now, it's interesting on the capital side. There's the operational side of OC Transpo, what it takes to actually, run the buses and make sure it has an operator and fuel and insurance and everything else. But then there's the investments in the public transit infrastructure itself, the capital side of the budget, right? So... the big one there, of course, is light rail. So when you say dealing with looking at cutting capital projects, does that include light rail, phase 2, phase 3 planning?
The phase 2 piece, because those contracts have already been awarded, and so, we're contractually obligated to keep going with that. So, no, that's not on the table, cutting the stage 2. There's different examples. I don't want to get into the list yet, Rob. It's going to be publicized, and everybody will have a choice. I think there was some examples provided last fall when we had the discussion on it, but I don't have them top of mind right now.
But it might include something like new buses, or maybe some kind of like investments in bus shelters and these
fare gates. Some of them needed to be changed. Ticket machines. There's different. Equipment that we can delay or cancel the purchase of, for example. And that'll all get laid out, and we're going to hear from our ridership as to what they can live with and live without. But you're absolutely right. I hear you that we have to now make those decisions that if we knew this pandemic was going to last this long, I think these decisions would have been made earlier. But we collectively, with the other levels of government and with the input from the ridership, made the decision that, okay, let's try and keep the capacity there for people to keep them as safe as possible as the system's moving through.
Okay. I thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate your time. Bye.
Councillor Hubley. He is the Kanata South representative, and he's the chair of the Transit Commission, the city councillor for Rideau-Vanier ward. Mathieu Fleury is coming up next on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Papa Jack was started 14 years ago, really by accident more than anything. A friend of mine had bought a grocery store, a popcorn machine was in there, he didn't want it, I ended up by buying it. My family thought I was nuts. When I first said, come and pick up this popcorn machine, my son said, what the heck for? I won't use exact words. But anyway, we started and it just kept on growing and growing. But at the time, I was the only one selling popcorn in Ottawa. But we persevered as a family, and here we are. So it's been very, very rewarding for my family and myself. And to see our brand name, Papa Jack, and Papa Jack came out of, I wanted something that was going to be very bilingual. So Papa, and then in Ontario, everybody called me Jack, even though my name is Jacques. In Quebec, it's fine, it's Jacques, but in Ontario, it was always Jack. So we married the two together, Papa, Jack. With the store that we have on Thurston Drive, it basically, the factory's in the back. If you come into the store, you can see how the popcorn is being made during the week. So it adds an extra layer of, you can see the sanitation, you can see how we do it. It's not like making popcorn. Most people thought when I started this, I was making popcorn in my garage or in my basement. No, never did. It was started in this building, in the back of the building, and then we kept growing and growing until what we have now. My daughter and my son came up with a brilliant idea to do a fundraiser online. So basically all people have to do is to register here, and we give them a special code number. And with that code number, they tell their friends or their neighbors, everybody, to buy online from us with that code number. And then at the end of each period, could be 2 weeks, could be a month, then we'll pay them a 20% of all the businesses that we got through that code number. One thing I'd like to say is thank you to all the Ottawa people who have supported us and support local businesses. It sometimes people, you know, they talk about buying locally. Now it becomes that much more important to buy locally, to support your local businesses, because not too many of them are going to survive this. We're fortunate that we're so far so good.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Members of the city's Community and Protective Services Committee will vote today on a motion that's being put forward by two councillors, Fleury and McKinney, to have the city terminate an arrangement with a Vanier hotelier that sees this establishment house homeless families in off-site apartments costing about $100 a night, which is about $3,000 a month. Councillor Mathieu Fleury, Rideau-Vanier Ward, joins me this morning. Good morning, Councillor.
Good morning, Rob.
This is certainly a story that we've followed for a long time here on the Rob Snow Show. This involves a place called the Tabor Apartments. Tell me about the Tabor Apartments. What's your issue there?
So the City of Ottawa has an agreement with a number of hotels and motels when families are calling 311 because they have nowhere to go for an evening. The city will locate them in local motels and hotels. So the city has an understanding of a rate with the Ottawa Inn. A number of years ago, the Ottawa Inn owner saw the potential to make additional business outside of the hotel. So we started to buy residential properties and expanded the night per diem into those residential areas. So following that, there was an AG report speaking of that issue, which got the city to claw back on a number of the residential properties. I believe the last remaining one citywide remains the Tabor Apartment.
Okay, so is the Tabor, just so I'm clear, Tabor Apartments and the Ottawa Inn, is it the same ownership?
Correct.
Same ownership. Okay. So what are your issues? What are your issues specifically here?
Well, my issue is we have the city is, there's two issues. One, the first one being the procurement. So if I'm a landlord in the city and I have family units, I'm missing on a business of $1 million a year for 24 units. So there's no proper procurement yet. There's been a lot of money going into to this structure.
Okay.
The second one is the tenants really have no rights. They're residents. They're not tenants. They don't have a lease. They don't know when an affordable unit will come. So, we're spending a lot of money for temporary conditions when all those families are asking is a key to a unit with a lease.
I see. So, that's very interesting. They're not tenants. So
they're not tenants. They can be moved anytime. They have no rights. I've had to intervene as a local councillor on a number of those types of issues: property standards, pest management, intimidation by the owner. So there's been a number of situations. This is how I didn't just go around finding finding that the city was spending $1 million. I didn't find that invoice. I found out through the challenges that residents have highlighted to me with that relationship.
Yeah, and on my end, the questions that I have been getting for many years, this is not a new issue, of course, is $3,000 a month, and is this the best that we can do? For example, for $3,000 a month, is $3,000 a month. A room in a hotel, a room in a motel, or whatever the case might be. Surely for that kind of money, Councillor, I'm still a young man, you're still a young man. I doubt either of us in our younger days ever rented a place for $3,000 a month in the city of Ottawa, right?
Exactly. And that's what we've heard. We've heard constantly from landlords who've said, I don't understand why I can't properly compete for those dollars to actually house permanently those residents. That's $1 million. We had a landlord yesterday who sent us saying, here's an offer for $1 million. I could house 48 families, 48 different units for that $1 million. Why don't I get to compete? And why doesn't the city get best value for that situation?
Okay. So this is in the Ottawa Citizen this morning in Taylor Blewett's story. Quote, in their response to the councillor's motion, your motion, staff mount an extensive defense of their use of the Tabor Apartments. Confirmed it's in compliance with all zoning. All households receive case management services and access to 24/7 support through the city family shelter. Furnishings, linen, cleaning services provided. The Auditor General found the rates for the apartment units competitive compared with the city's rates with similar hotels. How do you respond to these staff findings?
So I haven't read that article. I've certainly, because it's my report, there are the staff's comments in there. To me, it goes back to, we have to worry about where we're spending the public dollar. There are fair processes that are established through procurement. That hasn't been the case here. There's fundamentally also a debate. We're taking what would be rental units in the community. We're monopolizing those when the intent of emergency stays are to be in proper shelters or in motels until you can find a key to a unit. As you know, I'm the advocate for housing. I'm the chair of Ottawa Community Housing. We want to house more families. We need to build more units. This transition situation is the worst is the worst perspective in my mind, and it costs a lot of money.
Okay, so how many units altogether are we speaking about?
24 units.
24 units. Okay, so and I assume that's for 24 families. So if this arrangement is ended, what happens to the 24 families that would be living in those units? What happens to them? What's going to happen to them?
Yeah, so certainly, and that's the concern of a lot of colleagues who've reached out to me. It's saying, like, look, what do we do? We agree this agreement is bizarre, but we're worried about the families. Ultimately, my focus is to make sure that those families are appropriately housed. City staff have told us that an average relocation for families in those units is around 4 months. So in my motion, I'm giving them 5 months. I'm open to friendly amendments if council members or colleagues are worried. Ultimately, to me, we should protect the family, but we should stop gaps. We should stop filling the empty units and let those be. If the owner wants to bid in an RFP, and if the owner happens to win, then that's a very different conversation.
Yeah. What's the long-term solution here? You have pointed out to me in the past on this show, Councillor Fleury, that actually when it's kind of counterintuitive, but when it comes to the whole issue of homelessness, finding space for families is actually that's the easiest part of a hard job. It's easier to find a space for a family than it is, say, for a single individual, for example. So what are some long-term solutions?
I wouldn't describe it that way, Rob. The way I describe it is the families are the easiest to house because ultimately, when you look at the profile of the families that are in our motels, they are poor. So they just need a subsidy. They need an affordable rent, which is very different from individuals that are in shelters who might have mental health, addiction, other challenges.
Yeah. So long term, what's the solution?
Well, look, let me give you in the same vein. We have 13,000 residents in Ottawa that are on a waiting list for an affordable unit.
Yep.
Of which 2,000 are in our shelters every night. Every day we don't build new housing, it's more expensive. Think about your housing. Think about the property values. You often hear on the show about the real estate values and the cost of housing in Ottawa. Every day we keep folks on a waiting list. 13,000 is a more expensive day for the taxpayer because at some point in time we have to build those units, and construction costs aren't going down. So, as Ottawa Community Housing, we've committed. We're comfortable in building yearly 500 units based on getting a $14 million equity yearly. That to me is a very affordable way to build units. Can we do more? Absolutely. But we need the three levels of government to align on these local priorities.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Fleury. We'll be listening to the debate today with much interest. Thanks again.
Thanks, Rob. Have a good day.
Yeah, so I spoke to Councillor Fleury this morning. It was about 8 o'clock, actually, before the committee meeting began. And this has come before the committee, and they
punted it.
They punted it. Okay.
Going to FEDCO.
So it's going to FEDCO.
March
so they had 17 delegations lined up to speak to this very issue. And they never got the opportunity, right?
No, it was very quick. Nobody really thought
6-5 vote.
coming.
We'll defer it. We'll send it off to FEDCO.
And
so that's the next stop for that one. We thank Mathieu Fleury, nevertheless, for his time. And Michelle Rempel-Garner, the Conservative Member of Parliament and the opposition health critic for the Conservative Party of Canada, will join us right after the news on City News.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, February 18th. Good morning. I'm Sarah Buchan. Right now in Ottawa, we're mostly cloudy and -8. It's overcast and -7 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. Provincial health officials report 1,038 new cases of COVID-19 and 44 deaths in today's reporting. Provincial health officials say there are 37 new cases in Ottawa. Yesterday, the health unit confirmed 67 new cases. Elsewhere locally, 8 new cases of COVID-19 in Eastern Ontario, while Leeds, Grenville, Lanark and Renfrew County report no new cases. Today's numbers out of over 56,000 tests. Canada's Deputy Chief Public Health Officer says federal and provincial experts are looking at Canadian research indicating one shot of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine may be almost as good as 2. Dr. Howard New says research is suggesting that Pfizer vaccine was 92% effective 2 weeks after just 1 dose is compelling. Researchers in BC and Quebec presented their study this week in the New England Journal of Medicine. Quebec Premier François Legault says his government will compensate movie theater owners for lost concession stand revenue after a disagreement he is calling Popcorn Gate. The province has said that movie theaters can reopen February 26th but cannot sell food in order to ensure people wear masks throughout the duration of films to limit spread of COVID-19. Legault said today the owner of the Guzzo Cinemas chain had threatened to stay closed because of the difficulty in turning a profit without selling snacks. The Premier says he will compensate movie theater owners for concession stand losses because he wants theaters to stay open to give parents an additional activity to do with their kids during the March break week. I'm Sarah Buchan. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
The opposition, the official opposition, the Conservatives, pledging to keep up the fight for the release of the vaccine contracts that the Canadian government has signed with the various vaccine makers. The Liberals, the governing Liberals, what have they been up to? Well, they've been up to what they've done in the past. They've been filibustering at the committee. In this case, the Health Committee. Michelle Rempel-Garner is the health critic for the official opposition. Conservative MP joins me now on City News. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, I have a strong sense of deja vu. A Liberal filibuster at a committee, you say. Do tell, please. What's been going on at that committee?
I know. I mean, the Health Committee has just been, blocked by the Liberals for the last 6 months. It's been really disappointing. I think Canadians, during the middle of this crisis, they want parliamentarians to work collaboratively, not just, down the Liberal Party lines. So, it's disappointing. We did put forward a motion. Opposition parties have been working collaboratively to get more information so that provinces can plan for vaccine delivery schedules, trying to understand more information about variants, what the federal government needs to be doing to help provincial governments to respond to this crisis, and it's just been blocking every step of the way. So yes, there was a filibuster on Friday. It was disappointing, and we'll be continuing to push this week.
Okay. Tomorrow, I guess, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right. What do you want to see? What do you want to know that you don't know already?
Well, my concern right now is that because the Liberal government has been so delayed in getting vaccines to Canada that now that they're promising more coming at the end of this quarter, what does that mean for things like dosing windows? Because you need 2 doses of this, right? So the provinces have to plan for that accordingly. Do we have enough freezer space for the mRNA vaccines? Do we have enough storage capacity? All of that comes to answers from things like firm delivery schedules. And if these companies aren't meeting their timelines, what recourse do we have as a country, right? There's a lot of information that it's not just me looking for it. Provincial governments are looking for it. Health officials are looking for it. And the media is looking for it as well. And, just also on principle, Canadians have paid a lot of tax dollars for these products, a lot. And they haven't gotten them yet, right? So I think that part of responsible government is explaining to Canadians what they've spent their money on, right? And we need to ensure that we're getting value for money at this point in time. And given that we've seen this huge delay, which, I mean, this delay has cost businesses their livelihoods, it's cost people their lives. We need this information to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Okay. You are comfortable if some parts of these contracts remain redacted, though, right?
Well, without getting into the early morning sausage making of what was happening at that committee, we've technically already passed this motion.
I see.
So
okay.
You remember back in October, we passed a motion in the House of Commons to compel a huge volume of information from the federal government to understand what was going on with the pandemic and how they were making decisions.
Yep.
So technically, we've already passed this. The problem is that it's not been forthcoming from the government. So what we're doing is just putting forward a motion to accelerate the release of something that we've already, the House of Commons has already
requested. Yeah.
So this has all been litigated in the media. We've been very, more than accommodating with the government. So you can understand my frustration. I think a lot of Canadians share it.
When the Liberals filibuster, I mean, during the last filibuster, it was getting kind of juvenile and ridiculous at times, some of the antics that were going on. I mean, reading from telephone books and, quoting Plato and Socrates and all this crazy stuff, right? What have they been up to at this committee? Has it reached that level of inanity yet? Or where are we here?
You're making my eye twitch a little bit.
Sorry.
About it, right?
Okay.
At this point in time, Canadians have sacrificed a lot over the last year. Freedoms. People have lost their lives. Our frontline workers in the healthcare system are, overworked, and businesses have closed. People want to get their lives back. What they don't want to see is, members of Parliament from the Liberal Party wasting time and tax dollars when we need to find a way forward to have some hope. I don't think anybody listening to this has had an easy go of it over the last couple of months in lockdown. There's mental health issues.
Yeah.
Juvenile, in peacetime, I guess, is one thing, but now is not the time for this sort of stuff to be happening from Liberals. And I just, if any of them are listening, I just encourage them to understand the gravity of their role in this situation and work collaboratively to get some answers so that we can move forward.
Well, they are big fans of the show, as I'm sure you're well aware.
Sure.
I must ask you as well, because people are looking to your party as the potential government in waiting, right? So they don't want from the Conservative Party just throwing criticisms every day. They want possible solutions. So if your party was in government, what would you be doing to improve the situation?
Well, we'd be striving to improve the situation, right?
Okay.
What I haven't heard from Trudeau yet is here's how we're getting out of this, right?
Okay.
This is how many people that we need to be vaccinated before new public health guidelines are coming out, or that there's certainty for businesses or residents in long-term care facility, or what we would be doing is giving Canadians some certainty and hope, not just scrambling around to, deal with delays in vaccine delivery. But part of getting to that is understanding where the problems are at, right? So to me, this isn't about criticizing. This is about clearly, and I mean, I take no joy in this, but clearly the government to date has failed to get us vaccines. There's been a big delay.
Sure.
We're far behind other countries.
Yep.
We have to acknowledge that happened and then figure out why it happened so that we can fix it going forward. So I'd love to sit here with you. That would give me the biggest amount of happiness and talk about, okay, here's the problem, here's how the Conservative Party is going to fix it. But we need that information, right, to be able to do that.
Everybody because you still don't know what exactly is broken.
No, I
right?
don't.
Yeah.
I don't know what they agreed to with these companies. I don't know why they haven't built out domestic manufacturing capacity like other countries have. There's just such a whole host of questions. And I think, in coming days and weeks here, we're going to have to very quickly be talking about how is the federal government supporting provinces on vaccine rollout, right? Like, do they have resources to do this now that there's a delay? And then what is the federal government doing to provide a path to an end date to this, knowing that there's variants, et cetera, but we can't continue indefinitely in lockdown. And I think a lot of businesses, a lot of families, a lot of healthcare workers are asking that question. They're like, okay, well, this has to be the last lockdown, right? And now that we have tools like therapeutics, like rapid testing, like the vaccine, those should be used in coordination with better public health data to make durable, sustainable solutions that don't involve the long-term removal of Canadian freedoms, businesses, and mental health. Right? So that's the difference. Our party, we're happy to be talking about those issues because we have to, right?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know what else.
Let me ask you, Michelle Rempel-Garner is our guest. Calgary Nosehill is the riding. She's the health critic for the official opposition. Where is your party on this whole issue of provinces being able to secure their own supplies of vaccines and thereby kind of bypassing some of these problems that the federal government seems to
I certainly understand the frustration of provinces. Like, to date, I know that Manitoba, Alberta is looking at this as well, is looking at signing contracts and perhaps providing resources for the manufacture of the type of vaccine that has to date in early data shown the best results against these variants, right? And given the delays, I think it's very reasonable for the provincial governments to be looking at this. That said, this is the federal government's responsibility, and I want them to succeed. They haven't to date, and I think it's prudent for the provinces to. If I was in a provincial government right now, what else would you be doing, right? What else would we be doing?
Right.
But I don't think they should be in that situation. So, I think that as we move forward, we have to look at this vaccine scenario, understand that the Liberals have mishandled it. They let the provinces down. They let Canadians down. I'm not sure that if they've mishandled vaccines this way, they're going to be able to deal with economic recovery. So we have to know what happened. We have to understand why this went so wrong to make sure it doesn't happen again in the future. And then very quickly, like yesterday, be telling Canadians when this ends, right?
Yeah.
And we have enough data and understanding now that we should be able to get to
the
that.
Prime Minister says it's going to end in September.
He hasn't said that, though, right?
Well, he says, look, if you need a vaccine, if you want a vaccine in September, you can get one.
Well, but, when we're in question period and I ask the ministers, okay, well, are we going to lift restrictions? Or, for example, with people who are crossing the border who are vaccinated, would they have to go to these quarantine hotels? And the response is yes. That's okay, well, why?
If everybody's going to be fully vaccinated, and we can achieve something close to herd immunity by September, then what?
Yeah, and I understand that there's data to be gathered on that, but the government should be talking about what they're doing to get that data. We need certainty, and we need hope. We need a path forward.
Okay. Look, just one quick question here, a very quick answer. I know this is not health related, but nevertheless, this is a major focus for the opposition is Mr. Trudeau's soft talk on genocide and his double speak and his word salad. It's very reminiscent to me, Michelle Rempel-Garner, of all the work that you did to try and resettle Yazidi women who were being plundered by ISIS. And there was the same kind of, ignorance of the issue at the time. Do you find a similarity there between those two?
There are situations where you have to take a bold stand.
Yeah.
To do what is morally right. And what Trudeau has a hallmark for in these situations is giving a very bureaucratic answer, like, well,
technically this and whatever.
Yeah, and it's you know what? That's not what leadership looks like. What leadership looks like is saying, this is wrong. The treatment of these people and what is happening here is a scar on humanity, and it must be stopped. And with the power that I have, here's what I'm going to do to stop it and fix it. Like, I mean, the Yazidi case, what is this, 6-7 years later, after all the work that we did, it still hasn't reached the International Criminal Court in any meaningful way. Justice has still not been brought to those people. Canada hasn't taken any active role in doing that. And now, Trudeau will get up and give these tearful speeches about, like, oh, never again, never again. Well, never again means using your power to ensure never again happens. And, so today the dance around on the Uyghur genocide is highly problematic, to put it mildly. He I don't know. It makes me very angry.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Upsetting. Thank you for your time this morning. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Michelle Rempel-Garner, Conservative MP and the opposition health critic. Dr. Ray Deonandan on the recombinant COVID-19 variant next.
I'm blessed to be married to someone who is a scientist and spent a lot of time following what was happening over in China ahead of time. So he did give us the heads up that this was coming. Not that we believed him right off the bat, but when it did happen very, very quickly, we were prepared. We had hand sanitizer and we were set up to not close our doors. So we locked the kitchen down at Wellington Street, but we left this kitchen open. We put in protocols immediately. We only allowed our very small crew of 4 or 5 people in at the time. No deliveries were allowed to come in or out of the building without, they just weren't allowed in and out of the building. So we met them at the loading dock and had very strict protocols in place right away. We had masks and hand sanitizer and the whole thing. So we're very lucky from that perspective, and we're able to, learn as we went, as far as doing small, individually packed caterings, the frozen soup program, food for the Ottawa mission. So we didn't have to close the kitchen and then learn how to reopen it. We just were able to modify and shift as we needed to. Because of our partnership with the Ottawa mission, we were able to very quickly help support them. They were able to send us some product and some supplies, so it wasn't a burden on our business, and we were able to supply the staffing and the packaging to help produce that when they needed it the most. And we produced about 1,400 meals a week to complement their meals, and we started our soup program right away. We realized very quickly that there was a need in the community to get together and all work together, not only to support local, but also just to support all the people that were suddenly in a position of, being locked down and not being able to get out. So by starting that soup program, our community, our clients got online and started making donations for the soups, and we were able to produce the soups and get them back out to people that needed it. We're right now currently making 150 liters of soup per week, but we've made, I would say, 5,000 or 6,000, easily since the pandemic. Probably more. I'd have to do the math, but lots. I think everybody in the city has to be very aware of how blessed we were to have great weather this summer and people were able to get out and about, and that's going to shift. So we do have to be much more aware of who our most vulnerable is, and I really think we have to work together as groups. There are so many organizations in the city that are doing something and contributing and working together, and I think it doesn't matter who, but see what you can do to just step up and help them, whatever it is, whether it's driving or delivering food, or someone has extra zucchini in their garden, or if they can afford to donate some money to any of these organizations. I just think we all have to work together. We're smarter and wiser than we were the first time.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
When variants merge, this is the latest news in our fight against COVID-19. Recombinants. What does this mean? Dr. Ray Deonandan is back on the Rob Snow Show this morning. He's an epidemiologist and an associate professor at the Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Ottawa. Good morning.
Good morning.
Recombinant. What does that mean?
It means that genetic code is disassembled, then recombined, and two different sources recombined together. So this is not an unusual event in the world of microorganisms, and coronaviruses are known to have done this in the past. And this was predicted to happen with SARS-CoV-2 many months ago. Many virology experts were saying this is an eventuality. The way it works is if two different closely related viruses, in this case two different variants of COVID, infect the same person, in a given cell, there's RNA streaming back and forth. Because the way a virus works is it injects its genetic material into your cell and tries to get your cell to create itself. So suddenly two of those viruses are doing the same thing. And then the genetic material gets confused and ends up in the wrong, in creating the wrong virus. So if the viruses are closely related, you get bits of genetic material forming both of them, and you get some sort of hybrid creature as a result.
Okay. So is it still COVID-19?
Yeah, it's so closely related, it's still COVID-19, to the extent that any variant is COVID-19. Now, that's a qualitative judgment. We have mutations, we have variants, we have strains. These are names that are irrelevant to most people, but yeah, we can consider them to be still COVID-19.
So would it be too early to know if a recombinant is more severe, causes more severe illness, or would be more contagious? Certainly, contagion is a great fear about some of the variants that are circulating.
Sure. Many things to unpack here. First of all, as far as we know, this was wild in the sense that it happened naturally in a person in the laboratory detected it, but it might not have been. It may have been caused by the laboratory. We don't know. This thing may be happening all the time, but now we have a high-tech lab that was looking and was able to detect it. So let's not get too carried away here. And it's very common for these events to happen and create something less lethal and less transmissible. It's almost a little bit random. So you can create a hybrid that is not particularly good for the virus. It's way too early to be concerned about this. However, there is the chance they could create a variant that is both hyper-transmissible and hyper-infectious and lots of other things.
Right.
It's unlikely at this point, but it's possible, so we have to keep our eye on it.
Okay. Yeah, it could be that, or it could be benign is not maybe the right word, but maybe much like what do you call it? The original COVID-19, I guess you're saying.
Yeah, look, two geniuses having a kid don't always produce another genius.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I guess we'll see what happens. I want to ask you a few more things while we have you on the line this morning.
Sure.
Here we go. There are many warnings about reopening things right now, as we are doing this week across the province of Ontario on a regional basis, because of the variants, because of the pace of vaccinations. How wise do you think it is right now to be reopening businesses?
First of all, these decisions aren't made with just the public health perspective in mind. You have to consider the economics, the public tolerance, the need for kids to be in school, all that stuff. So with that caveat, this is a multi-perspective endeavor. I'll speak solely from the public health perspective, and that is, it is too early for a number of reasons. Number one is we do expect a third wave because that's what everything points to. And that third wave might actually be worse than the previous waves in terms of cases, not necessarily deaths. Second is that we're in a race here against the new variants. The B117 UK variant is likely to become the dominant variant sometime this spring. And when that happens, we're in a new realm of chaos where we have to harden our healthcare systems even more so. And it might actually be more lethal too, so it could be scary. As a result, we have to vaccinate more people ahead of the schedule when we think this will be the dominant variant. And if you give the virus a head start, that's not a good idea. Opening things up gives the virus a head start to transmit and to gain traction. So this strikes me as a poor strategy if the goal here is to win that race and to be able to reopen safely later in the year.
Okay. Why do you think, though, that the recent data suggests the case counts and certainly the number of fatal cases has declined and declined rather significantly in the last, say, 14 days, in percentage terms down double digits?
Yeah, this is true around the world. And number one, there are at least 6 different reasons. 4 are unlikely and 2 are likely. So the most likely reason is we're coming off of the Christmas holidays when people were socializing and the numbers were very high. So the hangover from that is finally faded, and we're going back to the normal levels of transmission. So that's the sort of the illusion of a decline in cases. Second is that many parts of the world are now taking this more seriously. Europe, the Middle East, and the USA have really instituted stricter conditions, better mask wearing protocols, better quality of mask, looking at ventilation better, so the public health response is better. The other reasons that are less likely include seasonality. It doesn't look like it's very seasonal at all. So cross-immunity people talk about. There isn't a whole lot of evidence for that. A testing bias, that doesn't really exist either. And lastly, immunization. So only 3 countries, Israel, UK, and the USA, have vaccinated at scale. And it seems unlikely that that's what's causing the decline in cases. It's more likely the 2 things I mentioned, the post-Christmas hangover and also the fact that these restrictions are working. But if you lift the restrictions, the cases will go up again. The caveat being, because we've done a good job immunizing long-term care residents, this third wave, the death toll may not be as high, which is small mercies.
Okay. One more, well, maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Reuters News is reporting out of the UK this morning that Britain is going to become the first country to deliberately infect healthy volunteers with coronavirus in what is called a human challenge trial. It's going to be a small trial, 90 people between the ages of 18 and 30, but they're going to volunteer and be deliberately exposed to coronavirus in, quote, a safe and controlled environment. What do you think about the ethics of such a thing?
Yeah, that's a big question. If you had asked me this a year ago, I would have said, okay, we're in a crisis situation. I guess we have to loosen the ethics rules here. But now it's a preventable disease in the form of vaccination. So I'm not sure this is ethical anymore. It got ethics clearance, so clearly other people disagree with me. And I'm not sure what we hope to achieve with this. If we had been proposing a challenge trial, again, 6 months, 7 months, a year ago, to test the efficacy of a vaccine because the world desperately needs one, all right, the crisis mode necessitates the changing of ethics standards maybe. But we have vaccines.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command.